Racist, sexist, homophobic and broken. That's the verdict of a damning new report into Britain's largest police force.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 21st of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Leading the news this morning.
Whichever way you look at it, whichever label or description, the evidence is absolutely clear that as an institution, are they prejudiced and discriminatory? Yes, they are.
A landmark new report into the Metropolitan Police has recommended that the force be abolished in 5 years if it doesn't change what it refers to as a rotten culture. The review by Baroness Louise Casey also warned that the force could be harbouring more killers like Wayne Couzens.
The Democratic Unionist Party has said it will not support the government's Windsor framework in Parliament. The party's leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, said the decision to vote against the Stormont break was based on ongoing concerns.
Boris Johnson has submitted a dossier of evidence in his defence ahead of a grilling tomorrow over whether he lied to Parliament. It comes amid speculation that he's planning a political comeback if he is cleared by the inquiry.
The RMT union voted to accept a new pay offer from Network Rail in an agreement that will bring some strikes to an end. Members voted overwhelmingly in favour of the deal, which represents a 9% pay rise over 2 years.
And a new report into potholes has found that almost half of Britain's roads are crumbling, with almost 3 million cars forced off the road in the past year. It estimates the cost of repair backlog to be approximately £14 billion.
See, I experienced this last week going to Cheltenham. Where we live in London, the road outside our house has loads of potholes, but actually in central London, it's actually not too bad. But driving to Cheltenham, we slammed the brakes on to avoid potholes, we swerved around potholes. Absolutely terrible roads. I was really struck by it around the Gloucestershire area. And it's dangerous. It makes you drive dangerously and it's expensive, damaging cars. What's been your experience? And is the government doing enough? A little extra 200 million going towards potholes from the budget?
Spending that money in the right way, because the way they repair them and then the roads crumble again after that, the repairs are simply not good enough. So stop spending money on silly, stupid, ineffective repairs. Let us know. Our top story this morning is a damning new report into the Metropolitan Police, which has found it to be institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic.
Baroness Louise Casey's independent review also called the force rotten, adding that she couldn't guarantee there aren't more officers like Wayne Couzens and David Carrick among the ranks. Here's what she had to say.
The moment that Sarah Everard was raped, abducted, raped and then murdered by a serving police officer, I find it extraordinary that in policing and in the Met Police, that wasn't their moment of like a plane falling out of the sky. I just think it is so dreadful and, you know, has to be a moment that change came. Change didn't come, so now this report has to carry that and has to take responsibility for getting the change needed that we should have had at the point that that young woman lost her life.
In response, Commissioner Mark Rowley said that progress was being made to reform the Met.
Accepting her language in terms of the bullets of the diagnosis of what we've got wrong. I'm just simply not wrapping it up in the same label. We are going to be anti-racist, anti-misogynist, anti-homophobic. I've stepped up massively our capability in our professional standards department. Our men and women in the organisation are reporting more incidents. We are sacking officers at a faster rate because of their help. So we are making the progress that people would expect us to do. It's going to take us some time, but we are slowly reducing the risk that we have people in the organisation who don't have the integrity the public would expect.
Well, we can speak now to Kevin Hurley, who's a former Met Detective Chief Superintendent. Good morning to you, Kevin. I don't know if you were in the force at the time of the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, which found the Metropolitan Police to be institutionally racist, but this report seems very much to have the same sort of gravitas and implications.
Well, I was in the force at the time of the Lawrence murder and report, in fact, and one of my best friends is the man who solved it and caught the murderers. The first line of that report says it all. It's not the size, it's the inadequate management. What policing suffers from across the whole country is a complete breakdown of leadership. It's a very true phrase, a fish rots from the head. And as someone who works internationally now in some of the most dangerous places in the world, trying to bring some semblance of order, it's always the people at the very top who set the culture and the tone. And what's happened in the Metropolitan Police over the last 15, 20 years, to save money, they have completely hollowed out all the sergeant, inspector, superintendent, chief inspector ranks. So there's not the leadership, guidance or coaching there once was when I first joined. And it's all very well for a number of these very senior police officers coming on the TV, commenting how it's all so awful and so awful. But my message is, they were all at the top of the Met when this has been going on the last few years. So what have they done about it? But a final point, and I think it's very important we need to remember this, at this very moment, there are thousands of police officers out in London attending emergency calls. Some will actually be fighting to arrest people as we speak. They do that because their job is unique. They have to go out and confront wrongdoing. No other job does that. You need to be physically courageous and morally strong to do it. If we continue to kick and undermine the police as we are doing, as this report is yet again going to do, and that's not to say there aren't key points in that should be looked at and considered, we do so at our peril, because I can assure you, coming from a family of 9 Metropolitan Police officers, today's report will further undermine and demotivate the police who we expect to go out and protect us. And I think it's very important, very important that the horrific murder of by Wayne Cousins of Sarah Everard and the behaviour of that guy Carrick don't stunt us and start to overreact when we've got 2 different psychopaths there, which many organisations have got them up and down the country. The NHS has had countless scandals.
Yeah, but Kevin, Baroness Casey is saying that they're not alone. They're not unique, that there are more and more and more of them, and she can't guarantee that someone else is not in the force who will murder in the future.
Well, Eamonn, they are alone, because he's the first person in my career I've ever known murder and rape and abduct someone. So, yes, there will undoubtedly be bullying, misogynist people in the police service, as there are elsewhere. But I don't think we serve anything, or any of us well, by saying that the police is full of Cousins and full of Carricks, because it's not. And we should remember this. Wayne Cousins was convicted in what the leading judge at the Old Bailey described as the fastest, most far-reaching, most professional murder investigation he'd ever seen. And he commended the entire Metropolitan Police team who did that. So in between throwing the baby out with the bathwater, we should remember Wayne Cousins was caught by excellent detective work. So it's not all bad. The problem
let's talk about what the problem is. The problem is there's this massive paradox that there seems to be, that the more the Metropolitan Police concentrate on reform, it seems the more bigoted its officers become.
Well, no, they're not, Eamonn. I mean, there've always been bigots in the police, as there are in all walks of life. I used to deal with them. You know, I've disciplined people, even fired people in the past. You get them in all walks of life. What's happened is, with the cuts and this push towards, how can I put it, meeting whatever performance targets or measurement systems are brought in an attempt to correct behaviours, we've cut out large numbers of leaders and managers, leaders really, who coach and mentor and show people what's the right thing, stand up against what's wrong. And so what you've ended up with is large numbers in some areas of people with boys' own cultures who bring the rugby club into the police station, and you see it in the different WhatsApp groups. They're appalling, these WhatsApp groups. But quite frankly, you went through the WhatsApp groups of most major organisations. A lot of it would not stand scrutiny. Even within GBNews, I'm sure there's shameful stuff on some people's WhatsApps. But I think when you cut the leadership and management, they've cut the leadership and management, they've cut the training, they've cut the development. So people who reach the senior ranks have got about 2 years less leadership training than I had. far less superintendents, inspectors and sergeants to support them. And as a net result, people go about doing their own boys' own stuff because we recruit kids. And if they're not set the right values, they end up being kids.
But the point is, Kevin, what's different from GBNews or any other organisation is that the police are there to protect and to enforce the law. And this report details 363 pages of absolutely abhorrent reading, from the sharing of revenge porn to the poor treatment of gay people in the wake of the Stephen Port murder, the terrible misogyny exposed towards female recruits. I think 4 times the number of women leaving the force than men, and a culture at the heart of it of denial, which I have to say, you sound a little bit like you share.
Well, no, I'm not, because if you remember, I said at the very beginning there are bigots, misogynists and racists in the police, and I've dealt with a good number of them. So I don't. I find the whole, the latest stuff that's going on absolutely abhorrent, quite appalling. However, I should tell you, I'm very proud to have spent 30 years in the Metropolitan Police, and I still remain proud to work with the fine men and women who are in it. But there are, like any other organisation in society, people with those views. And yes, the police are there to protect and prevent crime, which is what they do. What people put on a WhatsApp group is appalling, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's reflected in what they do. Yes, there have been sexism, there's been misogyny, there's been racism and bigotry, and I've seen it and I've stopped it. On my very first day when I joined the police in 1979, I physically grabbed hold of a constable in Whitehall and shoved him into a doorway for the way he'd spoken to black people in front of me. I was so outraged. So it still goes on. However, the issue is with the senior leadership for failing to set the correct tone. If you don't have the correct people selected to senior positions, you will not have the correct tone. The
Kevin,
way everything's operated.
You've
rots from the head.
Okay, rots from the head. Okay, thank you, Kevin. You obviously hurt. You obviously take this personal. It's obviously a force that you loved and you feel that has a purpose, and you feel is being judged wrongly. You think that the leadership, the guidance and the coaching, the training is not there anymore, that a whole layer has been taken out in terms of management, and I think a lot of people could relate to you with all those subjects. So thank you for your experiences, your story. Kevin Hurley is a former Met Detective Chief Superintendent. Your views on what he's had to say this morning. We'd love to hear from you. Get in touch the usual way.
It's interesting, when he was criticising the leadership there, what are your views on what the Commissioner, Mark Rowley, has come out to say? He's rejecting the language that has been put forward in this report, saying he rejects that it is institutional. Do you think that's the right approach, given that the criticism is of a culture of denial? We'd love your thoughts on that this morning.
Yeah, what's your experience of the police been? Let us know. 13 minutes past the hour. The Democratic Unionist Party will not support a key part of the Prime Minister's Windsor framework on Wednesday. Yeah, MPs will be given a chance to vote on the so-called Stormont break, but the DUP leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, says the party's unanimously agreed to vote against it.
Clearly, we continue to have key concerns about that framework. The Stormont break, of course, is designed to manage any future change to EU law, but it doesn't cover all of the concerns that we have. And divergence between UK and EU law can occur not just because the EU changes its law, but also because the UK changes its law. And we need to ensure that Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom and its internal market is properly protected. Street has said there are no plans for substantial changes to the deal. So what does that mean for the future Brexit arrangements? Well, here to give us his thoughts is the political analyst Leon Emirali. What do you make of it all?
It's interesting, and I think it takes the shine off of what has otherwise been lauded as a very successful renegotiation of the deal by Rishi Sunak. So I think the DUP coming out at this point, so further down the line from when it was first negotiated, is interesting timing from them. And let's be realistic here, them voting against it, it's not going to derail the whole deal. There's only 8 DUP MPs. What they'll be hoping for is that there are a rump of perhaps Conservative MPs that join them. So far, there's only been one that says that they will do that. So it isn't going to derail the deal, but it certainly takes the shine off of Rishi Sunak's sort of crowning achievement in his time in office so far, and I think that'll be disappointing for him.
And what the DUP are calling for, what they're requiring, is it a tangible form of Brexit, or as someone described it, a unicorn form of it, that you're never going to be able to square that circle, and therefore perhaps you can never please the DUP on this issue?
Well, and that's been the problem with Brexit since the very beginning, Isabel, is it means different things to different people. Everyone has a different idea of what Brexit means to them, and certainly the DUP's idea of Brexit doesn't necessarily fit with the rest of the UK's, and that's why this has been such a complicated, messy process from the outset. And I think that realistically they have an issue with the Stormont break. That's one component of the deal. And again, for Rishi Sunak, that was a big crowning moment because he wanted to use that as a way of getting Stormont back into governing. Now, if they're not going to take part in that, it's not as attractive a deal, but it still solves some of the issues that existed in the protocol before.
Leon, do you understand it enough? I don't know if you do, forgive me for asking you this, as to why the Stormont break is an issue, because let's say it's eventually supposed to lead to independent arbitration on a particular ruling. One would have thought that was to the advantage of the government of Northern Ireland.
Yes, and Eamonn, look, the complexities of Northern Ireland, there are certainly, I'm not as qualified as others, and certainly yourself and others who've seen it up close as to why this is so complex and complicated. And that's the problem. There are a number of different issues wrapped up in this. It isn't just a trading arrangement. There is a history here. There is a fragility in what's happening in Northern Ireland and in power sharing, and how they can move that towards a place that works for all parties.
But it seems a reasonable proposal that if there is a problem for the Northern Ireland government, it can go to independent arbitration. Why would Sir Geoffrey and the DUP object to that?
Well, this is what I'm struggling to square as well, because Sir Geoffrey's coming out and saying that we're going to be opposed to it, but he hasn't necessarily outlined the key reasons as to what's the issue, other than they don't want to vote on, or they want to be able to have a say on EU law that's already existing in Northern Ireland and with the trading arrangements there. So there isn't enough detail from the DUP, I think, for Westminster to fully understand why this is such a big issue for them and for their voters. And that's what makes this such a complicated issue.
And Leon, finally, it's being dubbed Super Wednesday. Not only is there going to be this vote on the Stormont break, but of course Boris Johnson will be giving evidence. We're expecting that dossier to be published at some point today. The stakes could hardly be higher in this, could they? The sacred nature of the seat of democracy and Parliament versus the political future of who is undeniably a very charismatic politician.
Well, indeed. And look, select committees are normally quite dull affairs, but I'll tell you, grab your popcorn for this Wednesday, because it is going to be blockbuster politics. And this could end up being a pretty tricky week for Rishi Sunak if Boris Johnson seems to get on the right side of this hearing. But if he doesn't, then I think it's a win for Rishi Sunak, because it effectively consigns Boris Johnson's political career and reputation to the trash. So let's see how that plays out. But it's certainly going to be an interesting week in Westminster and beyond.
Indeed. All right, Leon. Thank you.
Thank you.
President Xi Jinping has met with Vladimir Putin in Moscow. It marks his first visit since Russia began its full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Xi said his country was ready to stand guard over the world order and praised his relationship with the Russian president, calling him a dear friend.
For his take on this, the Professor of International Politics, Scott Lucas. Scott, good morning to you.
Good morning, Eamonn and Isabel.
Well, what did you make of this meeting, this love-in between the two superpowers?
Lots of pomp, lots of ceremony. Now let's see the substance. And by that, I mean, you'd be very surprised if Xi had said that Vladimir Putin was a horrible, terrible man when he's being received in Moscow. And you certainly would be surprised if Vladimir Putin, whose military is in trouble in eastern Ukraine, or on their last gasp offensive, who desperately needs a friend, had said anything mean about Xi. When I say that we need to see the substance, China has given economic support to Russia by buying its oil and gas very cheaply and by expanding trade relations. China has given some political support to Russia by not even calling this a war. However, China has not crossed the red line of providing military support to bail Putin out as he runs into trouble over the failing invasion. And China has also distanced itself diplomatically. It's actually said in this 12-point plan that it's put forward, look, we need to respect the sovereignty of all countries, which means not just Russian sovereignty, Ukrainian sovereignty. In other words, China's main interest in this visit is not to help Vladimir Putin out. It's to defend Beijing's interests, which are to look like the big diplomatic superpower that can resolve this conflict, and to make a bit of money out of the conflict that's killed so many people, if it can.
Somebody shaking the hands of a man who's just been indicted by the International Criminal Court is certainly something to behold, and a historic picture and summit yesterday. But that 12-point plan you're describing, China trying to call it some sort of peace plan, the Americans saying do not be fooled. But we can't underestimate their track record on this, recently brokering a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. They could do the same, a planned call with Zelensky after his visit to Moscow from President Xi Jinping.
And I think you've really identified Beijing's tactics here. The difficulty for them to follow up the Saudi and Iran plan is that Saudi and Iran wanted to restore diplomatic relations for various reasons. They each needed to do so. Here, and we have to be honest, there's one man who stands in the way of any negotiations that are significant, and that's Vladimir Putin, because there will not be significant negotiations on ending this conflict, or at least getting a ceasefire, unless Russia agrees to withdraw from territory that it has seized since February 2022. And there's no sign that Vladimir Putin is going to withdraw from that occupied territory. Indeed, he keeps throwing more and more men to the front in sort of this desperate attempt to grab a little bit more territory in eastern Ukraine while he still can.
Russia has fallen out with the West. Naturally, it's turned to the east, and we're concentrating on China. But it's not just China who could be a possible friend or an actual friend to Russia. India must play a big role in all of this.
Not just India, but also Japan. And there's a connection here to look at, because this morning, it's not just Xi who's making a visit. The Japanese Prime Minister Kishida is in Kyiv talking to Vladimir Zelensky. Now, that's a clear sign of Japan saying, we back Ukraine's defense. It's the first visit by a Japanese prime minister since 1945 to a country which is at war. Now, how does India fit into this? Before he went to Kyiv, where was Japanese Prime Minister Kishida? Meeting the Indian leader, Narendra Modi, in India, because India has, of course, benefited as well from taking this Russian oil and gas, but it's very firmly sat on the fence. It won't call this an invasion. On the other hand, it will not give too much support to the Russians. And the Japanese goal, as well as the Americans and the Australians, who are in the Quad, this four-nation pact in Asia, is to make sure that India continues to sit on that fence and doesn't try to bail out Mr. Putin either.
Professor, finally, I don't know if you've seen some of the images doing the rounds, some of Putin parading through Mariupol or wherever it might be in occupied Ukraine. Lots of suggestions that he's got body doubles and lots of different versions of Putin seen out and about. I mean, do you believe any of that, or do you think that we're really seeing Putin, and a man that we know to be deeply fearful and paranoid at the moment?
No, I think that's a distraction to talk about doubles, because Vladimir Putin was in Crimea just before this. And of course, Russia seized Crimea in 2014. It was the 9th anniversary of that seizure that he was marking. And so, it's plausible that he went into Mariupol, this city that the Russians just destroyed last spring. Why? To proclaim, I'm still in charge. Look, we still have a victory. Here's the real story out of Mariupol. When you see those images you're looking at right now, they are very carefully stage managed. Putin met a very small group of people who were claimed to be residents. And while he was doing so, if you listen very carefully and know a bit of Russian, you can hear someone shouting in the background, "Don't believe this. This is all fake." In other words, Vladimir Putin, who also faces infighting in Moscow between the Russian Defense Ministry and the Wagner Group mercenaries, well, he wanted to say, look, I'm not losing this. Look, I can still win. Look, here I am. Whether that PR appearance in Mariupol has any substance, of course, will depend on what happens in the battlefield, and significantly on how much military aid Ukraine gets in forthcoming months from its international partners.
OK, interesting point to end on. Professor Scott Lucas, always interesting to talk to you, Professor of International Politics at the University College Dublin. Thank you.
To win the next general election, the Conservatives must retain at least some red wall seats across the North and Midlands.
Don Valley, just outside Doncaster, voted Conservative for the first time in 2019. But in November, Doncaster and Sheffield Airport closed, leaving many locals feeling angry.
Well, our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, has a special report on this.
Doncaster Airport last November. Thousands protest, angry at the closure of this busy South Yorkshire air hub. Also serving nearby Sheffield, Doncaster boasted daily flights to the US and mainland Europe. Less than 20 years old, this world-class facility now lies dormant. Airport owner the Peel Group says it's financially unviable. Local garage owner Mark Chadwick was shocked when Doncaster Airport closed. He set up a protest group on social media.
You couldn't find out why it was closing, what it was closing for, who was closing it. So I set up a Facebook group just to do something, just to see if we could find out what was happening. The first day we had 1,000 members. The first week we had 4,000 members. It's a travesty what's happened to our local airport.
The online campaign to save Doncaster Sheffield Airport now has over 20,000 followers and rising. This was once RAF Finningley, which for decades hosted fondly remembered air shows as captured in this home movie. The case for Doncaster Airport today rests on its central location, close to Sheffield, Hull and Lincolnshire. Before lockdown, Doncaster boasted 1.4 million passengers in 2019 alone, generating directly and indirectly around 3,000 local jobs. Just 90 minutes by train from the capital, Doncaster could also take pressure off London's busy airports. Business leaders say this closure is a disaster for the local economy.
We're thinking about taxi drivers, the local hotels, bed and breakfast, caterers, all of those small businesses that actually supply the airport.
We're in Don Valley, a red wall seat the Tories won in 2019 and need to retain. The local MP says the Labour-run council and mayor should buy this facility, as happened with Teesside Airport in the northeast.
This is what happened in the north with Ben Houchin. He actually bought it. A Conservative mayor bought the airport and made it work. We need the same thing to happen here.
At Doncaster's Parkland Social Club, locals are adamant their airport should survive.
They don't need a third runway. Is it Gatwick and Heathrow? So can you have Doncaster? It's the hub of the country.
The Sheffield Airport shut down a few years ago. So really, Doncaster should have taken up the slack on that. And why it's shutting, I was still a bit mystified of why it's actually closing.
They sell the land for housing and they get more money than selling it as an airport or using it as an airport and keeping it running.
Peel Group refutes this and says the high fixed costs associated with running a safe regulated airport mean a break-even business plan can't be identified for the foreseeable future. Planes haven't landed in Doncaster since November, but the campaign to save this regional hub is in full flight. Liam Halligan, GB News.
Very interesting that. I think regional airports are so important for connectivity within the country. And I do think there's a gentleman in that report, and he made this point, they don't need a third runway at Heathrow. They don't. Because what we should have, in my view, and believe me, I am a seasoned traveller. I travel a lot by aeroplane around the UK, and I'm supposed to be guilty about that, am I?
Not anymore.
No, anyway. But we need the Doncaster airports, we need the Southampton airports.
Bristol, shout out for Bristol Airport.
Bristol
that kept
Airport,
my
Cardiff
marriage
Airport.
alive for years.
Yeah, there's so many of these airports that we need and that are very, very important for people moving around the country. And indeed, if you live in the Doncaster area,
jobs,
getting abroad and jobs and all sorts of things. There is nothing as awful as, I'll single out Gatwick Airport in particular. Massive, absolutely massive, impersonal. You could be lost in Gatwick Airport for 3 days. No one would ever find you.
I like the North Terminal. I don't like the South Terminal. Got something against the South Terminal. I don't mind the North Terminal. I think I'm just associated with going away on holiday.
But why need for two terminals? All I ever knew about going away on holiday, we used to go to Portugal a lot. And it was always the flight to Portugal, whether it was EasyJet, British Airways, whatever, it was always at the furthest
gate,
the last gate possible ever. And too big, far too big, and we need more Doncasters. That's my view. What's your view as the time approaches 6:30?
Stay with us. Coming up, we're going to be asking, can we fix the country's pothole crisis? We'll be discussing a new study that says almost half of our roads are crumbling. Find out more in a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 6:32. Still to come on today's programme.
At 10 to 7, we're going to be talking to the Cabinet Minister Mark Harper about what the government plans to do in response to that new report that says the Met Police is rotten. He's also Transport Minister, I think, as well. And we're going to be talking to him about these strikes, what's still to be settled and why they've settled with the RMT. At
7:20, as Rupert Murdoch ties the knot once again at the age of 92, we'll be debating how many times is too many to get married.
Well, how many times is too many times to change your car?
Oh, come on.
No,
I'm not a big changer of a car. Keep a car, run it into the ground. Or a husband.
I'm trying to think. So his new wife is 66 years of age and he's 92. So that's basically a 30-year age gap.
Right, okay.
Do you think that's too much?
I would at any other age, but somehow at that age it seems less shocking. Do you know what I mean? What do you think? I mean, they look like a lovely couple.
They look like a lovely couple.
But you know, fifth time, crikey,
I can understand why she might
exhausting.
want married, but I don't understand why he might
Old
want
romantic,
married.
maybe. Let us know your thoughts.
So let's talk about this whole pothole situation. You don't need me to tell you how bad it all is. So what we're going to do is we're going to get someone who actually is out there driving, and he's a black cab driver. His name is Mark Baxter. Mark, you're parked up at Heathrow this morning. Have you got to the stage, Mark, where you just don't even look forward to your job?
I used to love my job, Eamonn, but it literally is every morning now is a task. You know, there's either one thing or another that's always sort of thrown up at you.
Yeah. Where do you think basically they're going wrong? I mean, I tried to look at this and I say, right, government ministers will come on this programme and they'll say, but we spend all this money and we repair these potholes. But the thing is, they don't repair them. They don't repair. I know. You laugh. And so where are they going wrong? They will say, we spent money and we repair them. Where are they going wrong?
Well, it's a temporary fix all the time, Eamonn. And basically, you've seen it yourself, and people will resonate all around the country when they go past these holes and there are 6 men looking into the hole, and there's one man that's going to actually fix the hole. I would much rather that one man went along to 6 holes and those 6 guys were fixing the holes properly, you know, because it's always a patch-up job. It's never a proper job.
Yeah.
And I can only talk about, you know, the roads here in London. And when you've got a city like ours that is promoting, let's say, you know, a cycling fraternity, for instance, I mean, it's bad enough for my vehicle. I spend at least £600 to £700 a year, you know, putting new ball joints into my vehicle because of the holes that I bounce up and down from. But if you're on a bicycle and you've got maybe a child on that bicycle, I would hate that to be that, you know, in that position.
Yeah, well, also, I mean, it's not just the monetary cost to you, I suppose. If you have to suddenly slam your brakes or swerve to avoid a pothole, that also is incredibly dangerous, isn't it?
Isabel, you're quite right. And also, because of the way that we, here in London, as I say, I can only speak for London, the structure now is that the road system that we have, cars actually have less room because of the infrastructure that we set in. You know, it's been shrunk. So we can't swerve to avoid these things because we are then endangering other people's lives. You know, this is serious, but the fact is that the financial situation has been squeezed so tight, and especially with the transport budget in London, you know, we're having people that should be digging or fixing holes going out and putting cameras up to tax the poor rather than doing the jobs that would make a difference to people actually driving in London.
Yeah. And also then utility companies. Don't start me on utility companies because when they do get a road repair, there's these Egypts come along putting down cables. And so it has been from the 1980s when they started putting down cables and then they dig up and it's unbelievable.
Well, you know, again, Eamonn, you know that basically, that you know, you'll have the gas people will come and dig a hole, they'll fill the hole in, and then 2 weeks later, the electric people will come along and they'll dig that hole again, and then they'll fill it up, and then the satellite company. So it despairs that people in City Hall or in government don't actually employ somebody that works these streets to say about these repairs.
There should be a full-time minister, Mark. Somebody, you know, it's regarded as a bit of a joke, you know, potholes, whatever. I think Mark's gone there. I think he's frozen.
Frozen mid-speech. But, you know, we've got the Secretary of State for Transport on, so I think we could talk to him about that, as well as all the trains and everything else.
I mean,
Neil,
Mark makes a very good point there. I had terrible problems with my ball joints over the years. And have you ever had your ball joint go? I don't know what a ball joint is. It's in your car.
Oh, right.
So it's like a hip joint, you know, that goes
like
into
your axle.
The car. No, it gives a suspension
I
thing.
have done some serious damage to my car. I don't know the technical term.
Your ball
I've
joint
definitely
will have gone.
cracked something.
That would be it.
Neil says, I watched a Sunderland council worker repair potholes in -2-degree weather. Who's organising this? I mean, what kind of idea is that?
Well,
-2. Everything freezes and contracts,
yeah.
and then suddenly it warms up.
Expands and simple physics.
Very simple.
Simple chemistry.
We'd run it much better, wouldn't we?
Anyway, your views, keep them coming in. We'll return to this. We're sorry we lost Mark Baxter out there, but maybe he got a job.
Yes.
Maybe he was flagged down. We're going to talk about the landmark new report into the Met Police with Martin Dobney and Davinia Taylor in the papers.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, The People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
20 to 7, let's bring you up to date with the front pages of the newspapers. The Times, first of all, leading on that view into the Met Police. We'll be talking about that. So far this morning, we'll talk about that throughout the day, saying the public has lost faith in it.
The Telegraph also leading with Met Police report describing the force as racist, sexist and broken.
Mirror, Boris Johnson's submission to the Partygate inquiry, describing it as a dodgy dossier.
And in The Sun, they described the country's pothole problem, reporting that almost half of our roads are crumbling.
And that's where we're going to start. Joining us to go through the papers this morning, journalist and former Brexit Party MEP Martin Daubney and the actress and well-being guru Davinia Taylor. Very nice to see you both.
Thank you. Good morning.
Martin, these potholes, we were talking to Mark Baxter, who's a cab driver sitting outside Heathrow today. It's just beyond parody, it really is.
Yeah, I mean, many motorists across Britain will be used to that feeling of having their fillings shaken out as they do the school run or go shopping. And the problem is we're also having the money shaken out of our pockets, left, right and centre. And it's just an endless black hole of potholes. And the numbers are eye-watering. 14 billion quid it's going to cost to fix this. 49% of all British roads are suffering from potholes, and it's going to cost £68,000 per mile to sort this mess out.
Yes, but they get away with it.
Yeah.
They can patch it up, you can get by, it's not the end of the world type thing. It looks awful, it hits you right up the ball joints, everything is really, really awful, but the government ain't going to do anything about this, are they?
Well, the problem is they've offered £200 million at the recent budget to fix this, but as we can see, if it's going to cost £14 billion, that really is not just a drop in the ocean, but a drop in the pothole. And I think motorists are increasingly frustrated. They feel that they're a cash cow that's being milked dry. Look at the numbers. 35 billion per year is taken off motorists in fuel duty and road tax combined. And that's before we get to all these clean air initiatives that are creeping out, £500 million in London alone. So there's a huge amount of money being milked from motorists, which isn't going towards sorting out the roads. There's a huge disconnect, and it furthers the theory that milking the money from motorists just to pay for everything else is where we're at. I think motorists are just sick to the back teeth of being treated like second-class citizens.
But there are certain motorists, you're sitting in a car and you see a pothole 30 yards ahead, and you just know that driver sitting beside you is heading straight for that hole and doesn't deviate away from it. Now, I don't know about you, but I see a pothole in the road and I think I'll avoid that.
Would you be talking about your wife there?
Could be. But why do certain people think that's there in the road, I'm still going to go straight and go down that hole?
It's a target. You get points, right?
I think, sadly, intelligence isn't part of getting a driving licence.
OK, let's go to the Mail. Davinia, Rupert Murdoch is to marry for the 5th time. He's 92 years of age. Anne Leslie Smith is his fiancée. She's 66.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the TV show Succession. Yeah. I mean, this is a real-life version of it. So I just wonder how, I mean, he's been divorced, 5 times, and I think each time's costing around about 30 million, which in the great scheme of things, someone worth 17 billion isn't probably it's probably a drop in the ocean and maybe tax deductible. I don't know how he's figured that one out. But yeah, it should be interesting to watch this one. But another interesting thing is that he seems to think that this is his second half of his life. So he's 90, is he 92? So he's got another 92 years at this. I mean, we were just talking before, he is probably the guy who will live forever, let's face it. He's got the ability to buy anything, probably including an extra few years. But I'm just wondering...
Looking at those pictures, I'm not sure.
I saw a picture of him yesterday with his first wife, and I didn't recognise him with hair. He had black hair, and he looked totally different. For so long, he's been a sort of, for want of a better word, a geriatric sort of bald man. Yeah, but you know what, 92, good luck to him. Or does it kind of cheapen marriage if you just change your wife like a pair of socks?
Well, part of you thinks good luck to him, and she's I think she's pretty tidy.
Apparently, she's a former police chaplain. Yeah, you're allowed to say that. She's good looking. Yeah,
she's a very good looking 66-year-old lady, and you know, much younger than him, of course. But I wonder what the kids think. Oh, you'd be like, oh, Dad.
Here we go again.
Not again. It's like, what about the will? What about the Wonga? Because you're not telling me that the Murdochs don't care about the brass.
Also, I think that she said she has a radio show, and she said something about the pandemic being developed in Davos. So I'd imagine there's a bit of conspiracy theories going on there. She'll have to sign some sort of silencing, gagging order, and you know, basically it's hush money, isn't it?
But you see, you talk about is it cheapening marriage and whatever. But the people who cheapen things are the ones who shack up with each other. They shack up with each other for 7 years and 10 years and whatever. No one ever says, oh, that's Fred and Mary, and they were together or they were married. That's as if it never happened. So they were only married once, or were not married at all, or this is the first time getting married. So they're the sneaky, sly ones who get away with it, who don't. It's not that they don't consummate it. They
don't want to think about that.
Officiate it. They don't make it official.
Yeah.
They don't make it official. So I have a thing about them. We're going to be talking about this. What time are we doing that, Isabel?
7:20.
7:20. We're going to. Is there too many times? Can you get to a stage where you're married too many times?
Some people would say once is enough.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid. I'm talking about somebody who's been married a fair few times, Boris Johnson. He's preparing to make an extraordinary political comeback tomorrow, but we're expecting this dossier to be made public today.
Yeah, and it's going to be the biggest story in town, aside from the Windsor framework, which seems to be falling apart. The Windsor knot tying Rishi to political failure by the looks of it. But it's going to be televised, this thing. So it's going to be political box office. And it really depends on where you stand on Boris. A lot of people talk about how many times is too many. I think a lot of people in the Tory ranks would probably hand Boris their wives and their cigars and cognac. They seem to forgive everything about the guy. I think what's going to happen is, looking at the way this is going to roll out, he will be looking to throw advisors under the bus. We saw he already did that with Allegra Stratton before. Now this guy, Jack Doyle, WhatsApp messages will come out of how he was only towing the correct line on what to say. And he will say he didn't willingly break rules or knowingly break rules. He'll try and bluster his way through the TV trial. And if he gets away with this, and he's allowed to be selected for MP for the next general, and if it goes the way it's most likely that Rishi will lose the next election, then I think it's a comeback for Boris as Tory leader at the next general election. I think the ranks of the Tory party will probably very much welcome that.
I do wonder if there is a moral dilemma for those MPs who are die-hard allies of Boris Johnson for lots of fair enough reasons. I mean, he's an electoral golden goose, he's charismatic, all the rest of it. But those same MPs, I wonder how much they value, you know, the importance and the integrity of not being misled at the dispatch box. It's absolutely critical that that is upheld, that it is seen to be that prime ministers are doing the honest thing. And my fear is this is the clash of the titans between you know, the seat of democracy versus this huge electoral political vote winner.
Very noble, very laudable and very commendable comments, but actually all they care about is winning.
OK, we're going to go now to the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, who joins us now on a very busy day. Seems to be, Mr Harper, that maybe some good news, pressure may be being released, tapering off with the rail strikes. Why have you eventually settled now with the RMT?
Well, look, I was really pleased, Eamonn, yesterday, and good morning, by the way, with the result from the RMT members that work for Network Rail. That was it was a very convincing result. It was a 90% turnout, and 76% of them accepted the fair and reasonable offer that Network Rail had made them. And also, Network Rail can now get on with delivering reform to how they deliver maintenance and how they run the infrastructure on the railways. That's halfway done. I think the next stage is that I want the RMT to put what is broadly the same fair and reasonable offer to their members that work for the train operating companies and call off next week's strike. So I think that would be fantastic news for the travelling public if their members, if the RMT members get the chance to consider that pay offer as well for those that work on the train companies themselves.
Looking at the details of this deal, uplift on salaries of 14.4% for the lowest paid, and then it was 9.2% for the highest paid, increased back pay, no compulsory redundancy, and rail travel benefits. Why did it take so long to get to this point?
Well, look, I think you'd have to ask the union. I mean, when I became Transport Secretary in the end of October, I immediately tried to change the tone of the debate that we were having. I sat down and met all of the rail union leaders, and I made sure that fair and reasonable offers were made both to the staff that work on Network Rail, but also those that work for the train operating companies. And I'm really pleased that we've got to a position where, at least on Network Rail now, all of the unions have settled their dispute. They can get on with delivering an improved, modernised way of running the rail infrastructure. And as I said, what I hope is that the RMT put what is broadly the same value of a deal to their members who work on the train operating companies, and give their members the chance to make a decision about whether they want to accept that deal. Ultimately, you know, I think trade union members should make the decision, not their trade union bosses.
Transport Secretary, potholes, I presume they land on your desk. I presume they're your responsibility?
They do, and that's why you'll know, Eamonn, there was an extra £200 million in the budget that the Chancellor made available, which is going to be distributed to councils across the country, on top of the regular funding that they already get from the government to improve the state of the road network. And I hope that extra £200 million
Look at the figures that have come out today saying that you need 14 billion. It's all right saying there's an extra 200 million. It needs 14 billion, they're saying in this report. Over half the roads in the whole country are falling apart, it appears.
Well, it's the case that we already spend several £billion a year on the maintenance of our road network. What the Chancellor announced in the budget was an extra £200 million on top, specifically to allow councils that have responsibilities for roads to improve the quality of those roads. And we continue to spend several £billion a year on maintaining our road network across the country, as your viewers would expect us to do.
Yeah, but you don't really, because you say, right, they filled in that hole, and then you allow that to sit there for 6 weeks, 6 months, whatever, and then some other utility company comes along and digs it up, and the quality of work is shocking, really, in terms of filling in those holes.
Well, look, what we do now is we've got schemes in place now that local authorities have the ability to do for managing how utilities work, so that they can insist on utilities having to get that work done within a certain period of time, or else there are financial penalties. So I think local authorities have the powers to manage these things. The most important thing is we have made more money available to local councils to improve the quality of the road network, as well as the money we make available to national highways to deal with the quality of the strategic road network, so the motorways and the A roads, which carry significant amounts of traffic every day of the week.
Mark Harper, I want to ask you about this devastating, frankly, report into the Metropolitan Police published by Baroness Louise Casey, 363 pages, which make really terrible reading. How helpful is it, in your view, to have a commissioner come out and say, look, we accept these findings, but we don't necessarily accept the language, given that one of the criticisms was a culture of denial within the Metropolitan Police?
Well, look, I obviously haven't had chance, given it was only published late last night, to read the entire report. But what I did read was that Louise Casey has said herself, and she's written this very hard-hitting and troubling report. She says that both the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner, she thinks they absolutely understand and accept the scale of the challenge that they face in the Met. She thinks that they are up to the job of fixing the problems. And she says that they should be given the chance to get on and do it, and she thinks that they will be successful, and that we should all back them in the very significant changes they've got to make. And I think it's the substance, and watching what the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner do to change the culture, the work they've already done. They have got a massive task on their hands, but Louise herself says that they will get the work done, and we should all back them in
yes,
the
but
essential changes
how
need
can
to
they
make in the
fully
Met.
understand those criticisms if they reject the language? We've talked so often with the government about the importance of language, and she's talked about institutional racism, misogyny and homophobia. And if you've got the man at the top saying, I don't accept that language, then can the Metropolitan Police learn from this?
Well, look, I think she's given in her report, and I haven't seen all of it, but I have seen some of the very troubling examples. She said there are examples of all of those things in the Met, and I don't think the Commissioner is saying that that terrible behaviour hasn't happened. He just hasn't accepted putting a label on the entire force. And I think what's important is that we focus on what he and the Deputy Commissioner are going to do, the actions that they're going to take to turn the force around. And Louise, as I said, Louise Casey herself thinks that both the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner understand and accept the scale of the challenge. She thinks they are capable of turning it around, and she says that we should all back them, as she does, to deal with the big challenge that they face. And they undoubtedly do have a challenge. And you know, I just also want to focus on the majority of police officers, both in the Met and across the country, who do a very difficult job. You know, we ask them to do that job on our behalf.
Oh, we seem to have problems.
Are we with them or are we not with them? Is he there? No, he's not with them. Well, we were going to talk about
Terribly sorry, I want to talk about the DUP. See if we can try and re-establish
the
comms there.
The Windsor framework there.
But
anyway, Martin, you heard what Mark Harper was saying there. Oh, we are going back, are we?
Good.
Mark
Huge
Harper, you
apologies.
were just talking about backing people backing the Metropolitan Police Force. We lost your microphone there, but just to say, talking about backing, you're not being backed by the Democratic Unionist Party tomorrow over the Windsor framework. A word of advice, or what would you say to the DUP?
Well, look, I think, first of all, I think people do generally accept, and in fact the DUP themselves accept, that the Windsor framework is a significant
Right.
No, it appears, sorry, Secretary of State, we're picking up road traffic rather than your microphone, so sorry about that. Anything you'd like just to add to any of that?
Well, I'm keen to get actually Martin's take on this DUP intervention. Yeah. You know, there's a suggestion that it could embolden some of this core of the Conservative Party. We certainly had quite a few emails this morning saying actually the DUP objections are many of their objections. To the Windsor framework, which is that any involvement from the EU will never be acceptable. But there is always going to be this circle to try and square, isn't there, in Northern Ireland, because of its unique position?
Yeah, the Northern Ireland Protocol was a disastrous piece of legislation. The Windsor framework is worse. And basically, the DUP are doing the right thing by voting against it. A few Tories may go with them because it will get voted through anyway because of Labour. But it's the right thing to do to reject this if you believe in the future of the United Kingdom. And we can't leave part of the UK at the control of Brussels.
That's Martin's view. Your views are very, very welcome. Martin and Davinia will be back in 40 minutes' time. Please do stay with us. We'll have more on that report into the Met Police. And after the weather, let's have a look at what's happening.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Racist, sexist, homophobic and broken. That's the verdict of a damning new report into the country's largest police force.
Hello there, very good morning to you. It is 7 o'clock, it's a Tuesday morning, 21st of March. Tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Whichever way you look at it, whichever label or description, the evidence is absolutely clear that as an institution, are they prejudiced and discriminatory? Yes, they are.
A landmark new report into the Metropolitan Police has recommended that the force be abolished in 5 years if it doesn't change what it refers to as a rotten culture.
Well, a review by Baroness Casey also warned that the force could be harbouring more killers like Wayne Couzens. I'll be outside New Scotland Yard with response to this blistering report into the Metropolitan Police.
The Democratic Unionist Party has said it will not support the government's Windsor framework in Parliament. The party's leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, said the decision to vote against what's called the Stormont Break was based on ongoing concerns.
Boris Johnson submitted a dossier of evidence in his defence ahead of a grilling tomorrow over whether he lied to Parliament. It comes amid speculation that he's planning a political comeback if he's cleared by the inquiry.
The rail union, the RMT, has voted to accept a new pay offer from Network Rail. This is an agreement that will bring some strikes to an end. Members voted overwhelmingly in favour, which represents a 9% pay rise over 2 years.
And a new report into potholes has found that almost half of Britain's roads are crumbling, with 2.7 million cars forced off the road in the past year. It estimates the cost of the road repair backlog to be approximately £14 billion.
Please do get in touch. A lot of you doing that today. On the screen is how you do it. Doncaster Airport. Colin says, I live near the airport. It takes thousands of vehicles off the road that would be travelling to Manchester or Leeds on the M62. Isn't this the fuel emissions policy of the government for zero?
Dave on the Metropolitan Police says, I feel sorry for today's serving policemen and women who by far the vast majority are fantastic people. When I finished the job, not one supervisor came to see me or thank me for my service, but there again, I didn't expect it. And on potholes, Keith said, well, totally supportive of the movement to fix them in our roads. We must not forget the terrible state of our pavements. That's a fair point. I had to take my wife to A&E recently after she tripped and fell heavily over a surface irregularity.
And just before we get into this Metropolitan Police story, Dave says, on the Met Police, I feel sorry for today's serving police officers who buy...
I just read that one.
Oh, you've done that?
Just did it, yeah.
Oh, that's not awful how I don't listen.
No, it's all right. You were reading for the next one. That's fair enough. Fair enough. We'll be there. It was a good one, Dave. That's why we like it.
I think as people standing up for serving police officers and saying that there are more good than bad ones, your views, what do you think?
Now it is our top story this morning, the damning new report into the Metropolitan Police, which found it to be institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic.
Right, the report was conducted by a Baroness Louise Casey. It was regarded as an independent review. She also called the force rotten, adding that she couldn't guarantee there are not more officers like Sarah Everard's killer, Wayne Couzens, in the ranks.
Well, let's speak now to our national reporter, Ellie Costello, who joins us from Scotland Yard this morning. Good morning to you, Ellie. Tell us, first of all, those key findings of the report.
Yes, good morning to you both. This is a blistering report into the Metropolitan Police Force, and it branded it as institutionally racist, sexist and homophobic. 363 pages. It took a year to complete by Baroness Casey, and it was actually commissioned after the abduction, the rape and the murder of Sarah Everard by a serving Metropolitan Police officer, Wayne Couzens. And it was during that year-long review where another serving Metropolitan Police officer, David Carrick, was convicted of sexual offences and rape of 12 victims. So this is what Baroness Casey had to say about the need for change in the Metropolitan Police Force.
The moment that Sarah Everard was raped, abducted, raped and then murdered by a serving police officer, I find it extraordinary that in policing and in the Met Police, that wasn't their moment of like a plane falling out of the sky. I just think it is so dreadful, and, you know, has to be a moment that change came. Change didn't come, so now this report has to carry that and has to take responsibility for getting the change needed that we should have had at the point that that young woman lost her life.
Through the main findings, the report found that black officers are 81% more likely to be in the misconduct system than their white colleagues. Baroness Casey said that any attempts to improve diversity in the Met were not succeeding, and there were also some alarming case studies that were unearthed during this report, including during last summer's heatwave, a freezer that was full of evidence broke, and that meant that cases of alleged rape were dropped as evidence had been lost. There was discrimination towards female colleagues and sexual inappropriate behaviour in the workplace. And we also heard about initiation rituals, including people being urinated on in the shower. A Sikh officer had his beard trimmed. A Muslim officer found bacon in his boots. 1 in 5 Metropolitan Police officers had experienced personal homophobia. So it does make for damning reading, and that report suggests 16 changes to radically improve the Metropolitan Police Force. But Baroness Casey does warn that this boys' club culture, she calls it, is so rife, and the force could be abolished if this rotten culture isn't fixed in the next 5 years.
Quite shocking. What about the response?
Well, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has apologised to Londoners. He says that reading the report, it is ghastly. He says it generates a whole series of emotions, including anger, frustration and embarrassment. But he doesn't agree with Baroness Casey in the sense that racism, sexism and homophobia are institutionalised. He doesn't agree with that use of language. Let's listen to what he had to say about that.
Accepting her language in terms of the bullets of the diagnosis of what we've got wrong. I'm just simply not wrapping it up in the same label. We are going to be anti-racist, anti-misogynist, anti-homophobic. I've stepped up massively our capability in our professional standards department. Our men and women in the organisation are reporting more incidents. We are sacking officers at a faster rate because of their help. So we are making the progress that people would expect us to do. It's going to take us some time, but we are slowly reducing the risk that we have people in the organisation who don't have the integrity the public would expect.
Well, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has been responding to this report as well. She says it's clear that there have been serious failings in the Metropolitan Police Force, and adds that Sir Mark Rowley has been working to restore confidence in policing in London. And she adds that the government is also driving towards work to improve culture, standards and behaviour across policing, including strengthening vetting and reviewing the dismissals process. But there is that theme of trust, and that's hanging over this review entirely. A recent YouGov poll, which was out in February, said that just 6% of Londoners trusted the Metropolitan Police Force wholeheartedly. So there is going to be a long way to go, a very painful process to re-establish trust, confidence and pride in the UK's largest police force.
To this, Peter Williams is a former detective with Merseyside Police. Peter, good morning to you. Peter, we just want to gauge a reaction from you into this report.
Well, obviously it's published overnight and I haven't had the opportunity to read it line by line, but it was pretty heavily trailed yesterday in a couple of publications I read. So I have a pretty good idea what the content was going to be.
Oh, well, that idea will be kept to Peter until we can re-establish that link again. Leon Emirali joins us now to talk about all matters political, but this is going to take up a lot of space in the papers and on television and radio. And the thing is, it's an investigation into the Metropolitan Police, but people's fear will be, does this represent all police forces?
Yeah, absolutely, Eamonn. And I think there is a big issue here for the UK government, Suella Braverman as Home Secretary, to reassure the public that actually we can have faith in our police force. And the problem with this is we've had a drip, drip, drip of negative stories around the Metropolitan Police and other police forces around the country, and they're going to have a job on their hands to reassure us that actually we can trust the police and they are fit for purpose. But clearly this report is damning to the to the extreme.
Well, Leon, let's move on, shall we, to the other big story dominating the headlines. There's this big vote taking place in Westminster tomorrow on the so-called Stormont break. The DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party, coming out and saying they will not vote for it. How much of a blow is this to Rishi Sunak's plan?
I think it is a blow. It takes the sheen off of what has otherwise been a fairly celebrated renegotiation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. But, realistically, is this going to move the dial? I don't think it will. There are only 8 DUP members of Parliament who can vote against it. The hope for them will be that they can bring some Conservative rebels on board to vote against it too. But even then, it seems unlikely this is going to cause a problem for the legislation to pass. But what it does do is prove that Brexit is still a thorny issue for the Prime Minister and that he hasn't been able to bring the DUP on board, which would have been a big bonus for him, so he can finally say it's done and dusted and all parties are happy. Clearly the DUP have got issues with having to abide by EU law that's already in place as a result of this renegotiation, and I think Rishi Sunak will be looking at it with a slight headache and wishing it went another direction.
And look, Eamonn, you'll be able to say more than anyone here, really, how embarrassing this will be when the eyes of the world are on the Northern Ireland, when you've got former President Bill Clinton, current President Joe Biden, everybody flying in for that 25th anniversary. We haven't got power sharing in Stormont still after.
Yeah, well, the question will be, I suppose, Leon, the government will say, we instigated arbitration factors in all of this, the Stormont break. If you weren't happy with this DUP, this would have gone to consultation with us, the British government, and outside that it would have gone to independent arbitration. And I think where a lot of people are scratching their head is, and they're saying to the DUP, what more can we do for you? What more do you want?
And I think this is part of the issue that Downing Street will be thinking here, is that they've bended over backwards to try and create a mechanism that gets power sharing back up and running. And as Isabel says, there is going to be this set-piece moment to celebrate the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, US presidents flying over, as well as the great and good of British and Irish politics. So, I think that this is embarrassing for the UK government as well. And they will be asking questions. How can we appease the DUP? At what point will they change that no from a yes? And at the minute, it doesn't seem entirely clear.
And speaking of embarrassing for the government, talking about Partygate still, it's going to be Super Wednesday tomorrow with this Stormont break, but also Boris Johnson, a bit of political box office theatre, tomorrow afternoon being grilled. And that dossier, we're expecting to get our eyes on it today. Can Boris Johnson move the dial in all of this?
Well, I think he'll certainly be hoping to try and make his case, and I think that it is going to be political box office. Normally, these select committees are quite dull affairs, but I think we can guarantee fireworks when this takes place tomorrow. And look, I think Boris Johnson is going to do what he does best, which is throw some people under the bus to try and save his own skin. And, I think we are going to start seeing a series of emails, WhatsApps, whatever communication that went to Boris Johnson that proves he didn't know that these parties were taking place. But I think it's going to be very difficult for him to prove that when we've all seen the pictures, we've all seen the evidence that's come out to say that surely he had an understanding what was going on. He's the Prime Minister. He was the Prime Minister, for goodness sake. So I think it's going to be very difficult for him to come out of it. But if he can get out of it, then maybe the comeback is on. But I think the odds are stacked against him currently.
Leon, appreciate it. Thanks for your take. Thank you very much indeed. Time 7:14.
Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. The sister of a head teacher who took her own life after an Ofsted inspection says her death was a direct result of the report and the pressure of the process. Ruth Perry was the head of Caversham Primary School in Reading, and she killed herself in January whilst awaiting the review, which gave her school the lowest possible rating.
Members of the RMT in Network Rail have voted to accept an offer covering pay, jobs and conditions. Staff are going to receive a pay rise of 9%. That's over 2 years. The union says its 20,000 members voted 76% in favour of the new deal.
Damage caused by potholes has forced almost 2.7 million cars off the road in the past year. The car servicing company QuickFit estimates more than 13 million drivers have suffered damage to their cars as a result of impact with potholes in the same time period, with the average repair bill around £130 per driver.
Now, an Eritrean migrant who settled in Rwanda more than 17 years ago has told us he has no regrets about moving to the Central African nation.
The migrant, who now owns a chain of supermarkets in Kigali with his brother, had at one time been planning to come to the UK. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, is in Kigali and sent us this report.
To its critics, Rwanda has a deeply flawed political leadership with a lamentable record on human rights. To others, including the British government, this is an intrinsically safe and prosperous country. The truth, as always, is more complex and not well served by simple stereotypes. This coffee shop on the outskirts of the capital, Kigali, was opened 4 years ago by a husband and wife from Yemen who fled the fighting there as refugees and eventually settled in Rwanda. They've gone on to create a thriving business.
When we just landed in Rwanda, in the first few days, we decided we will not leave this country. We've been in Malaysia. Malaysia was not this clean or organized or safe.
When we just arrived here, people, they are so welcoming, they love expat, We saw that this different.
This is one of Africa's most dynamic economies. All the more remarkable given the genocide here less than 3 decades ago, which left 800,000 dead and millions displaced. Pierre Nyumbia's family fled Rwanda's civil war and eventually ended up in Canada. She's returned to be part of the regeneration, setting up a business that champions local arts and design. The fact so many here were displaced by the genocide has, she says, instilled a genuine compassion in many Rwandans for the plight of refugees.
It's definitely welcome because I think for us it's skill sets that are needed. And they're things that will help elevate a lot of the work that we're doing. I know for us as a fashion brand, we're always looking to collaborate with people from all over the world.
Rwanda's critics say its leaders care little for the plight of those displaced in neighbouring Congo, where it's accused of supporting rebel fighters there. Still, Rwanda is currently host to 140,000 refugees. The Eritrean owner of this Kigali supermarket chain arrived here 25 years ago after fleeing the fighting there. He was later joined by his brother, who decided to settle here rather than travel to study in the UK. Do you think people coming here, refugees sent here from the UK, do you think that they have a chance of making a good life for themselves, or will it be very difficult?
I don't think they will have any problem really, because this is a very, very peaceful country, a very clean, things are in order. Had the people been bad people, I wouldn't have lived here for such a long years, and then we wouldn't have been able to grow to this level where we are today.
It would be wrong to suggest Rwanda offers the same level of opportunities and personal freedoms as the UK. But from what I've seen, it's clear there is still plenty of potential for those who end up here to make a good life for themselves and certainly enjoy greater freedoms than the circumstances they say they're fleeing allow. This is a fast developing country. It's not all the way there yet, and certainly needs to do more to meet Western standards on human rights. But the country's supporters say it's rapidly moving in the right direction. Mark White, GB News in the Rwandan capital, Kigali.
As always, your views welcome. The time, 90 minutes past 7.
Stay with us. As Rupert Murdoch gets hitched for the 5th time at the age of 92, Kerry Katona will be telling us how many marriages are too many marriages. That's next.
So we'll be asking you the question at 92, why bother?
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
23 minutes past 7. Very good morning. Good to have you on board. Still to come on GB News Breakfast this morning.
It's World Down Syndrome Day, and at 7:45 we'll be welcoming back the model Lauren Hilaire, who's been on before and is on a mission to show people that the condition does not hold her back.
An hour later, at 8:45, we're going to get Labour's response to the shocking report that accuses the Metropolitan Police of being institutionally racist, sexist and homophobic. And you can join in, give us your views, usual way.
So there we go, the happy couple, Rupert Murdoch and his fifth wife on the front of many newspapers.
She's not
this
fifth yet, is she?
Oh, they're soon to be married, yes, soon to be fifth wife. 92 years old he is, and the media mogul has decided that, well, although he dreaded falling in love again, he has, and he's going to be marrying Anne Leslie Smith.
There's that song, Falling in Love Again, Never Wanted to, sung by a French woman.
That's
what
a lovely
am
accent.
I to do? I can't help it. See, that's me. I could fall in love very easily.
Yeah, no, I definitely am a hopeless romantic.
Yes, incurable romantic. But you believe very strongly in the institution of marriage and working at the family unit.
I do, and I think I'm probably in a minority in the panel that we're about to have this debate with.
Even if you're miserable?
Even if I'm miserable, I would believe in working harder, yeah,
okay.
but that's just me.
Well, let's find out the views of Kerry Cardona. She's done it a few times, three times, yes. And Elizabeth Taylor there, who got married 8 times. But this is not it's not the Elizabeth Taylor. This is Liz Taylor. She's the party planner.
Your wedding planner,
She
no
is.
less.
I've got her to blame for all this. Liz, will you do me a favour? Will you stop moving your head? You keep going out of the frame. Go a wee bit to your left.
I'm too twitchy because I'm going to tell Isabel all about the wedding.
All about the wedding. Yeah. You to blame. I'll never forgive you. Anyway, guys, Elizabeth, you're currently single, yes?
I am.
Do you
don't
plan...
buy the hat and don't buy the tie because I am never getting married again.
Why?
Oh, gosh. It's a whole long story. You haven't got time, but I can organise everyone else's wedding magnificently, but I am rubbish at choosing a partner.
And do you say that? Very difficult. When people hire you, do they say, can you plan my wedding? And you say, don't do it.
Seriously? No, I don't. No, are you kidding me? They pay me. But seriously, I came from a traditional Jewish background where if you weren't married at 21, then you were on the shelf forever. So I rushed into a first marriage. Then I married at 27 and had 2 gorgeous children, and that was a lot of a disaster. And then my third marriage, which was 20 years, I opened an iPad of stuff that I had no idea was going on. And so I'm single, and I'm happily single. And I don't want to get married again. I don't want someone to say to me, where should I put my washing or what's for dinner?
So, Kerry, for you, it's been 3 times. Are you currently married, or are you footloose and fancy free?
I know I can't keep up half the time with myself sometimes, Eamonn. No, I'm engaged. I was married at the age of 21, as everyone knows. And then I rushed into another marriage. My third marriage, my husband passed away, so I'm actually a widow. But I've been with Ryan now for 5 years. And I am an old romantic. I believe in that happy ever after. And I think just because it didn't work out the first time, or the second, or the third, does that mean that I've got to be on my own for the rest of my life? No, I want to go with my husband. In fact, Eamonn, I feel about 12 when I call him my boyfriend.
Yeah. Sometimes there are terms that maybe are not appropriate, that you outgrow those terms. Yeah.
And I also think as well, I have 5 children. I've got 3 children at home. And I also think about security as well. DJ, my youngest, she's only ever known Ryan as her daddy. When her dad died, she was only 5, so she's only ever known Ryan. So we're going to go down the adoption route as well with DJ. But also, if anything was to happen to me, I want to make sure that security is there for my children to remain with Ryan. And by being married, that all helps. But saying that, some days I really want to marry him, and then some days I really, really don't. So we haven't got married just yet, because at the minute I really, really don't.
And why? So are you worried that you could get married again and then divorced again?
Yeah. I mean, I put divorce lawyers, their business has gone through the roof with mine. I think it's like the 4th one I get is for free now. But I think I'm scared. I'm actually scared. The thought of walking down the aisle, I get really scared because, let's be honest, my track record has been abysmal. When I first got married to my first husband, I was 21 and I just wanted it to last forever. I didn't want to be rich and famous. I wanted to be a mummy and a wife. And, when you're a young girl and you put in that, the curtain net over your face and you pretending to get married because you watch Walt Disney films and You know, they're a knight in shining armour, and I've always just got someone dressed in tin foil who's an idiot. That's what I've always ended up with. But we all want that happy ever after, and I still want that happy ever after, but I am a little bit scared.
Elizabeth, I have a theory that in 100 years' time from now, sorry, I'm talking to Liz. I'm sorry to cut up Liz, thank you. I have a theory that in 100 years' time or so, they'll look back and they'll say, they'll laugh at 2023 and they'll say, do you know, back then, they expected people to stay with each other for life. Can you believe it? And I think genuinely in the future, there'll be some sort of civilized arrangement where, like a car, you can trade in your partner every 7 years or something. Something. And I think, and everybody will remain friends, Liz. I think everybody will remain friends, and it'll all be very
depressing.
Well, I'm just giving you my theory.
I hope that Ruth isn't listening to this when you refer to trading her in, because I don't think. I think that you might find the locks changed tonight, Eamonn. I have to say this though. Yes, I would like a partner. People, and also if you're relatively successful or independent, which I've had to be, you know, men like the idea, but then they don't want the reality. So I am a skeptic, but yeah, I would like a partner. I'm not sure about marriage. I was laughing before. I was thinking about Rupert Murdoch, because if I was organising his wedding, the order of service would be sort of around a prenup. You could have a lot of fun with that. So you could have all the different sections of the prenup could be the order of service. It's a great theme for walking down the aisle, don't you think?
Very good, and a very good tout for business there. I thought that very good. He may well be watching, listening.
You see, am I just, you know, a hopeless romantic, or am I old-fashioned? I mean, does anybody want to try and make marriages work even when they get tough anymore?
I think everybody tries.
Yeah.
I think people...
Do you think people give up as soon as it gets hard?
No.
I think all marriages are hard, no matter how good the relationship.
All relationships
I really do
are hard.
Yeah.
Try working with you every morning.
Well, exactly. Likewise, my darling. But, you know, you throw in kids, you throw in the stress of a job, and sparks easily get extinguished unless you invest that time and energy. What do you think, Kerry?
I actually think having children with somebody is a bigger deal than marriage.
Yeah.
Because the dads with my kids aren't involved anyway, but they're going to be connected to you for the rest of your life rather than just a piece of paper. So I think having that commitment, having a child with somebody is so much more bigger than walking down the aisle these days. And I tried everything in my marriages. I really did. My third husband, you know, I was in a really abusive relationship, and I kept going back and kept going back. You know, my first marriage, I can't help it if somebody else doesn't love me. And my second marriage, how many times have I been married? And my second marriage should have just been, that was a mistake, but I got 2 amazing children from it. So I've got no regrets from any of them, because they've all been lessons. So, but I think having a child with someone is a much bigger deal than getting married. I think when you get married, as Liz will tell you, I think it's just a massive expense. When I marry Ryan, I'm just going to go Vegas with Elvis.
Yeah.
I can't. I've run out of ideas, and I want to get married. I've been married that many times. And bless Rupert, you know, he's 92. Let him get married. These are his golden years. Yeah, I've got long left. If he wants to get married again, I think let him live out the best he can.
It's Kerry, all the ones who don't get married are the ones that get me. They don't have it on the record. They live together for years, and that doesn't really count. They can then move on, and they've only been married once or twice. They've had 7 relationships, but, you know, they get away with it only being one there to count. But Liz, it was interesting to hear everybody talking about, Isabel was saying, you should work at it. But what if you do work at it and the other person doesn't? I mean, I know some of your history as well, obviously, and you can be hurt, you can be betrayed, you can be, you know, it isn't always...
That simple.
That simple, is it?
No. And you do know a lot of the history. And I worked very hard for 4.5 years at the third marriage. But you know, it was dead before. It was dead when I opened the iPad. So there was no point. But you know, you do hang on, and you are very vulnerable. But you know, listen, I think marriage is a great institution if you can make it work. But there are a lot of challenges today in life, and there are a lot of expectations, and it's hard. Rupert, listen, if Rupert Murdoch can get the best things out of marriage at 90-odd, then good luck to him. I mean, he'll probably die on the job or something like that, you know, but what a way to go.
Gosh. 7:33, Liz.
But you've got everybody talking. Thank you very much indeed for what has been a very difficult interview for me to do, because I'm surrounded, viewers and listeners, by 3 women, each one I know, who would marry me like that. I know you all personally.
In an instant.
In an instant, but I'm not free, Carrie. That's the trouble.
My heart goes out to Ruth
I'm
all
not
day
free.
long.
I sit here with Isabel every day, batting back her sexual advances, and it's just and this woman, Liz Taylor, she
throws herself at you
all the time.
Oh,
all the
Ruth
time.
has a lot to contend with us girls.
But anyway, lovely talking to you, ladies, and good luck in love. Good luck in love to all of us.
Thanks, ladies. Lots of really sweet emails coming in. Rich and Jules, it's our 42nd wedding anniversary today. Sarah Hayton, I'm happily married, have been for 16 years. We have 2 beautiful boys. We struggle at times, but we're in it together.
Well, can I just say, those are the things that make me sick. Right. I remember doing an interview with the amazing film critic Barry Norman.
Yeah.
Who loved his wife and had...
That
he
makes you sick.
wrote this book about, and his wife died, and it was a book in tribute to her. And I said, my goodness me, it sounds like the perfect marriage. And he started laughing, and he said, listen, anybody who tells you that they've never had a crossword in 47 years or whatever it happens to be, he said, they're either telling lies or they're weird. There's something wrong.
Yeah.
There is something wrong.
Yeah, it's not all a bed of roses. Wow.
My wife believes in that. She believes in, having friction. She thinks that's like foreplay
it's like
to her.
tension.
That's like foreplay.
The makeup.
Yeah.
After the fight.
It's like, let's have a row today and 3 times today. She likes a bit of that. That's good. So what do you think? Your views are going to be very, very welcome. 25 to 8 is the time.
Stay with us. It's Gwyneth Paltrow versus Meghan Markle, 2 divorcees themselves. We'll be discussing the battle of the well-being queens with Martin Daubney and Davinia Taylor after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know, Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Emails are flooding in on that marriage debate.
So many people wanting to marry me.
I know, well, that's nice, isn't
Terrible.
it? Shelley Underwood, I don't believe humans are really programmed to stay together for life. I feel 10 years is about the maximum for a genuinely happy relationship.
that's what I'm saying.
That's your view. Maybe you and Shelley should get together. Nan McAllister says, too many people look for Mr. or Mrs. Perfect. Mr. or Mrs. Perfect don't exist. Married 48 years, there have been difficult times, but we have come through it. I always say, we're perfectly imperfect. Oh, cringe, but that is what I say.
OK.
What?
Where do you stand, Davina, on that whole marriage debate that we've just done there? Rupert Murdoch getting married again at 92.
I got divorced from my first husband about 15 years ago, and I was just saying I absolutely hate administration. I hate admin. So even though I went through a really volatile, hostile, acrimonious divorce, I kept my married name on my passport because even though I hated my ex-husband so much, I actually kept my married name because I hated the passport office even more. So, I mean, just remember that whenever you get married, you might have to deal with the whole admin hassle of driving licence, passport. It's awful. So, yeah.
Yeah. So that brings us... a lot of people would say there should be spice in one's marriage. And you've got a story there, Davinia, which goes to the classroom and an education for children as young as 11 into how to use various sex toys.
Yeah, I mean, I am flabbergasted by this. I'm the mother of 4 boys, so I might be naive in this, but each one of them just wants to be a professional footballer. And that's it. And I'm really happy with that because I don't want them exposed to something that they're not quite ready for. I was just thinking, you know, surely when you go into university, that sort of age group is when you expose yourself to stuff like that. I want my boys to stay as simple and as innocent as possible, regardless of the external influences at the moment. Because, I mean, we have got so much syllabus to get through. My son's 15, he's doing his GCSEs this year, and I'm just trying to get him to write a history essay. That is enough. I don't need more distractions, thank you very much. I want him to pass his exams. That's what school's for.
So do you keep them away from tech?
I mean, no, I don't. I really try. I mean, it's really tricky because I've got 15, 12, 9 and 7. So obviously the 15-year-old's always got his phone. So the 7-year-old's, can I see that? But I can hear it. I can hear what's going on. And, you know, if I hear any swearing or anything, I'm like, what is that? And my husband actually calls it LieTube. So he goes, oh, you're on LieTube again. Turn that off.
Look,
so it's that sort of attitude.
That's not what that story's about. It's not about keeping them away from tech. It's about keeping them away from anal sex toys and all sorts of things I'm not going to talk about here. Martin, what do you think of this?
Well, I've done quite a lot of education in schools. I've spoken to about 45,000 British teenagers after I made that Porn on the Brain show to try and keep people safe online. And what I do know is that a huge number of outsiders are now being invited into schools. In the first hand, because schools are often ill-equipped or embarrassed and don't know how to have this conversation, and sometimes more authentic to bring in outsiders with a proven pedigree in their field of expertise. Children are more likely to listen to them. But I think we've crossed the Rubicon now of education going into indoctrination. I think now we're going towards radicalisation, because undeniably, a lot of the groups that are getting into British schools now have a huge agenda, particularly around pronouns, around transgenderism. And we saw yesterday Global Boyhood, a charity endorsed by Prince Harry, is going into schools in Britain saying boyhood should be fluid. Don't gender children before they're born because it's transphobic. It's like, what are you talking about? This is not only happening in schools, but these groups are increasingly being involved in the writing of the curriculum for schools.
Right, and I get all that. Why are they being allowed to infiltrate like this? Why is this regarded? Everybody's frightened to say,
well
on the
you're a girl, you have a nice dress and nice shoes. People are afraid of insulting you.
You can't be
or boys or girls.
Well, look, the Prime Minister has said he's looking into what's being taught in these RE and PSHE, or whatever they're called these days, lessons, because as you described, Martin, there were reports of 92 different genders being taught in classrooms and all sorts of really graphic content about how to choke girls safely being taught to our children.
That's right.
I truly believe children aren't able to be children anymore, and we have no idea what the long-term implications will be for them on their future relationships, their ability to be happy, and we have to protect the innocence of childhood at all costs.
The ridiculousness of all of this. Sorry, just forgive me, but how can you have 92 genders? Can anybody get me more than 2 or 3?
Well, we're just so out of touch. I mean, you could come up. I mean, you can identify as all sorts of things these days.
But I really hope
Anything
that
you
the report you talked about there, Isabel, I really hope that the finding of this report is it's time to stop these organisations being allowed into schools. It's time to stop changing the curriculum, because another reason that this is happening is lots of heads of RSE are now seeing themselves as activists. In fact, it's almost like a kind of evangelical desire to preach the new faith of transgenderism using the children as their flock. So I think it's gone too far.
Can you explain to me, where is the cash coming from? Because there's always a motivator for this. What is the end goal? And it's got to be money. So where is the business model out?
It's a massive industry now. As I say, outsourcing expertise because schools are either too afraid or ill-equipped, but it's a huge industry, particularly in private schools. And we're seeing an explosion of the numbers of children of trans reporting. Now, is it that that's enabling and encouraging, or is it planting seeds in the first place? Whatever we think on that, I know at my son's school and my peers' friends' schools, there's huge confusion. I think we're going to see an emergence of a mental health time bomb. And there's a huge overlap between autistic children and this new way of life. And I think this has got to be dealt with politically, and it's got to be dealt with quickly.
I mean, why can't schools just stay in the lane and just teach maths, English, science, get the kids through the GCSEs and send them on their way, and then we can decide socially what's right or wrong for you, and just learn how to respect other people.
Absolutely, but I suppose, look, in defence of this sort of progress or whatever you want to call it, people would say sex education is part of education. If kids are watching this kind of hardcore stuff online, they need to understand the risks, how to be respectful to women, all the rest of it. They do have a duty of care. A lot of parents don't have any idea what's going on online. Teachers often are more in touch with that.
I mean, they need to invest in the technology.
Online? I mean, do you know, man,
this is according to the, I mean, the Children's Commission is saying children as young as 9 were seeing violent porn.
But there's enough money to invest in tech that can identify a young face, and it just shuts down. That's where the money should go in.
You guys talk a lot of sense on this. Basically, schools are there to teach. They're to teach you how to get on in life and how to speak the Queen's
algebra,
English, the King's English, and add up numbers and all that sort of thing. Davinia, Meghan Markle, Gwyneth Paltrow, what have they got in common?
So, I mean, this is quite close to my heart because I lost 4 stone changing my lifestyle. But these two guys, I mean, they have their own sort of wellness sort of like empires. And, of course, Meghan's jumped on the bandwagon. Gwyneth's probably worth about 150 million or something. I think she's got 8 million followers, and she's got this big website called Goop. I don't even know what Goop means. But, you know, you've got really... there's a huge epidemic with obesity and depression, and it is to do with wellness, but these two are really profiteering on it. I think Gwyneth sells some gold dumbbells for 120 grand. And Meghan, I think her website is called Tig, after her favourite £120 red wine. Now, I'm sorry, but wine is not wellness at all. I mean, the products that I sell, I think it's about... The most expensive thing is 20 quid. And I just hate this elitism with well-being because it's not fair, it's patronising. These women have chefs, they have personal trainers. You know, I have got 4 kids, I do 3 washes a day. It's just not achievable. And it's kind of like making the whole thing sound, well, profiteering again. So I'm pretty sad that she's jumped on this bandwagon, but it's completely inevitable.
All right, well, let us know your thoughts. She did set up Tig a little while ago, didn't she? And it all disappeared when she sort of took up royal duties. It's interesting to see its return. I can't wait to have a little nose.
Oh, of course, I'll nose it and I'll get really judgy. Of course I will. Yes.
Part of the fun. Should we talk dam busters, Martin?
Yeah.
This is about the migrant camp at a dam buster base. We talked about it the other morning. Telegraph picking up on it today. What are they saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's a story that GB News, laudably has been leading on. Nigel Farage was up there last night. And it's just a sign of the times, really. 40 leading historians have now written an open letter saying it's an absolute aberration that the most historic airfield in the UK, RAF Scampton, Lincolnshire, where the dam busters missions flew from, now to be set to be converted into a migrant camp. Basically, we have a huge problem with asylum hotels. So rather than spending them on hotels, let's lump them onto an old airbase. Similar thing was proposed at Linton-on-Ouse last year. I went up to Linton-on-Ouse and spoke to locals. A village of 150 people, 40 of which were children, was about to be dumped with 1,500 military-aged men who were allowed to wander around the village with no quarantine, no restrictions on their movements. And the locals were absolutely horrified at the prospect, rightly so. And it just goes to show you that the political resistance to Rwanda, to Suella Braverman's plans is all fair and well. But what are we going to do about this? If we're moving them to historic air bases, we can't afford the hotels, nobody wants Rwanda. I would say to those who say we are an open country, refugees welcome, well, where are they going to go? Where are they going to live? There aren't enough houses now. And why aren't young people more angry about this? Because they can't get on the property ladder. We have to accepting 500,000 people per year, a city the size of Birmingham, with not enough houses being built, has a knock-on effect. Has a knock-on effect in terms of public services, school places, doctors, dentists, and this is symptomatic of our time. It's symptomatic of a broken Britain.
Well, let's talk about that more in the next pay-per-view. I haven't got any more time to go into that. We spent so much time talking about sex education and sex toys in the classroom, but I do want to talk some more about that.
If you don't know anything about the dam busters, look them up. Look them up. 10 to 8 is the time. Let's bring you up to date with today's top stories.
A review into Britain's largest police force has found it to be institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic. Baroness Louise Casey led the review into the Metropolitan Police and found the force has a culture of denial. She's calling for a complete overhaul to restore public trust and confidence.
Democratic Unionist Party says it will not back the government in this week's parliamentary vote on the new Brexit deal. Party leader Geoffrey Donaldson says although significant progress has been made, the proposals do not resolve fundamental problems.
The Princess of Wales has created a business task force on early childhood with companies like Lego, IKEA and Unilever. This follows the Princess's launch of Shaping Us campaign, which focused on the early years of development. She's hosting an inaugural meeting for the companies at NatWest's headquarters in London today.
Today marks International Down Syndrome Day, a campaign launched to promote awareness and understanding of the condition.
And this morning, I'm delighted to say we're joined by the model, Lauren Hilaire, and her father, Julian, who are both here to tell us more about the importance of today and how we can all get involved. Welcome back, Lauren.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
So tell us, Lauren, absolutely fabulous to hear that you've been doing lots of modelling and you're a huge role model for the Down syndrome community.
I am, yeah. I am a role model to others with Downs and I can relate to them and it means so much to us.
And tell us...
to be on such a great TV programme.
Yeah, you're right. It is a great TV programme, isn't it?
Yeah,
nobody
it is.
watches it, though. Go out and spread the word. Lauren, how old are you?
I'm 25.
Right, 25. So, Daddy, Julian, when Lauren was born 25 years ago, what was your knowledge of Down syndrome?
Very little. We didn't know we were going to have a child born with Down syndrome, so we literally found out when Lauren was born. A midwife came and took her away after about 10 minutes, which was really traumatising for our first child. So we just thought, well... And then another one whispered, I think she's Down's. And we were like, what's that going to mean? Is it a disability? Is she going to be poorly all her life? So very little.
So is it fair to say then that your expectations for Lauren, and indeed, Lauren, your expectations for yourself, would have been quite limited?
Yeah, quite a lot of negatives, weren't there? The doctors were telling us about Lauren not walking, not seeing, not being strong and all this sort of stuff. And after a day of that, we decided we just wanted to go home and be positive, and that's why Lauren is how she is, I think.
And I'm sure, Lauren, your dad would say he couldn't be without you, and you are living your best life. Tell us about some things you've done, because I know you've been to Portugal and you've been on the front of Vogue there. The stuff of dreams.
Yeah, it was a very good experience to be on Vogue, and I really, really enjoyed the
Look at you.
Yeah.
Stunning.
Did you watch the Oscars this year?
I didn't watch it.
Well, did you hear about the young lad who's Down syndrome in the An Irish Farewell? They won the Oscar.
Oh, yeah, James Martin, yeah.
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 Yeah. So, you know, that must be great when you get people who are forefront there, centre of attention, and people only see them for the gift that they bring, the skill that they have. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good. Do you ever think of being an actor yourself?
Yeah, I do think of being an actress myself, yeah.
Yeah, what would you like to do?
I'd like to be in a soap one day.
Oh.
And maybe become a presenter.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm hoping to become a presenter.
She's been very concerned about your back, Eamonn.
Oh, well, that's good. I'm glad you're concerned about my back. I'm concerned about it too. But it's a bit better today. Isabel was very pleased with me today. You thought it was
He
okay?
walked in with a swagger this morning.
I'd like to say Eamon swagger.
Then I collapsed into this chair for 3.5 hours.
Julian, tell me, because when I had my kids, we went for lots of tests, and they would give you a probability of the chances of you having a Down syndrome child. And the science has moved on presumably so much since Lauren was born, but the result of that is probably there are fewer Downs babies and children than there used to be. And would you say that that's a sadness? Because actually, gosh, the joy that Lauren must have brought you, the love and...
We've had so many great experiences, and as you rightly said, I wouldn't change her for the world, because she does brighten up our lives, and a lot of children with Down syndrome are exactly the same in that respect. They have an innocence and a courage about them that just, it does lift you up. And she sends me text messages every day at work saying, "Don't get stressed, Dad, and have fun." You know, she's very positive and very defensive of people with disabilities.
So what would you say to other people who have Down syndrome on this International Day today? What would you say to them? What's your message?
My message today is to spread awareness about Down Syndrome Day and just to put it out there for people to see and to support us and, how do I say it?
We've got our odd socks on today.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, why are you wearing odd socks?
The reason why we wear odd socks is because we raise awareness and we...
Well, it just symbolises the whole day, doesn't it?
Yeah, it just symbolises, yeah.
You see, you know this dream you have of being a presenter?
Yeah.
You see that camera there, camera 6?
Oh, yeah.
If you just look at that, I think, what camera's a good camera? 5. OK, see number 5, this one here. Look at that.
Oh,
Can you read that? What it says there, stay with us.
Oh, yeah.
It says, stay with us. We'll have more on a new report that says the Metropolitan Police is racist, homophobic and misogynistic. And then you just say, that's after the weather.
OK.
Right, just say that's after the weather.
That's after the weather.
OK, and here it is. We'll see you after
Thank you, Lauren and Julian.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen. Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, I'm Michael Portillo. You can join me every Sunday on GB News. Remember to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel and to download the GB News app to stay up to date with the latest GB News content. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Racist, sexist, homophobic and broken. The verdict of a damning new report into the country's largest police force.
Good morning, it's 8:01 on Tuesday the 21st of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news this morning.
Whichever way you look at it, whichever label or description, the evidence is absolutely clear that as an institution, are they prejudiced and discriminatory? Yes, they are.
A landmark new report into the Metropolitan Police has recommended that the force be abolished in 5 years if it doesn't change what it refers to as a rotten culture.
Well, the report by Baroness Casey also warned that the force could be harbouring more killers like Wayne Couzens. I'm outside New Scotland Yard with the response to this blistering report into the Metropolitan Police Force.
The Democratic Unionist Party has said it will not support the government's Windsor framework in Parliament. The party's leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, said the decision to vote against the so-called Stormont break was based on what he called ongoing concerns.
Boris Johnson has submitted a dossier of evidence in his defence ahead of a grilling tomorrow over whether he lied to Parliament. It comes amid speculation that he's planning a political comeback if he is cleared by the inquiry.
The RMT unions voted to accept a new pay offer from Network Rail in an agreement that will bring some strikes to an end. Members voted overwhelmingly in favour of the deal, which represents a 9% pay rise over 2 years. The Transport Secretary told us earlier that he hopes the same progress can be made with other transport unions in the near future.
Stage is that I want the RMT to put what is broadly the same fair and reasonable offer to their members that work for the train operating companies and call off next week's strike. So I think that would be fantastic news for the travelling public.
And a new report into potholes has found that almost half of Britain's roads are crumbling. With nearly 3 million cars forced off the road in the past year, it estimates the cost of the road repair backlog to be £14 billion.
And we want you to get in touch the usual way via Twitter or email. Send in your thoughts to gbnews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
It's not just roads, it's pavements as well. Keith says, while I'm totally supportive of the move to fix potholes, we must not forget the terrible state of our pavements, which I have forgotten about. I had to take my wife to A&E recently after she tripped and fell heavily over what was termed a surface irregularity on the pavement.
And we've been talking about how many times is too many times to get married, as Rupert Murdoch is to tie the knot for the 5th time. John's got in touch. My wife was a 16-year-old when we met. I was 24. We married when she was 18, and we'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary next year. It's been a great life. And Wayne says, Isabel, I found the path to happiness with my wife is to eat out twice a week. She goes out Monday, I go out Friday. Twice married, but now happy. Keep those thoughts coming in.
And so we go to the top story this morning. A damning new report into the Met Police has found it to be institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic.
Baroness Louise Casey's independent review also called the force rotten, adding that she couldn't guarantee there aren't more officers like Sarah Everard's killer Wayne Couzens among the ranks.
Earlier on the programme this morning, we spoke to the Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, who told us the Met needs to change.
Louise Casey has said herself, and she's written this very hard-hitting and troubling report. She says that both the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner, she thinks they absolutely understand and accept the scale of the challenge that they face in the Met. She thinks that they are up to the job of fixing the problems, and she says that they should be given the chance to get on and do it, and she thinks that they will be successful, and that we should all back them in the very significant changes they've got to make. And I think it's the substance, and watching what the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner do to change the culture, the work they've already done. They have got a massive task on their hands, but Louise herself says that they will get the work done, and we should all back them in the essential changes they need to make in the Met.
Well, let's speak once more to our national reporter, Ellie Costello, who's at New Scotland Yard for us this morning. Good morning to you, Ellie. First of all, tell us the key findings of this 363-page report.
Well, this is a blistering report into the Metropolitan Police Service, which was carried out by Baroness Casey. It took her 1 year, and it was actually commissioned after the abduction, the rape and the murder of Sarah Everard by a serving Metropolitan Police officer, Wayne Couzens. And it was during that year-long review where we saw the conviction of another Metropolitan Police officer, David Carrick, for sexual offences for rape of 12 victims. This is the kind of context that we are talking about, and this is what Baroness Casey has been speaking about this morning, and why this force is in such desperate need of change.
The moment that Sarah Everard was raped, abducted, raped and then murdered by a serving police officer, I find it extraordinary that in policing and in the Met Police, that wasn't their moment of like a plane falling out of the sky. I just think it is so dreadful, and has to be a moment that change came. Change didn't come, so now this report has to carry that and has to take responsibility for getting the change needed that we should have had at the point that that young woman lost her life.
Well, the report found that black officers are 81% more likely to be in the misconduct system than their white colleagues. And Baroness Casey said that any attempts for diversity, to improve diversity in the Metropolitan Police so far, had not been successful. The report also revealed some very damning evidence of evidence being lost. There was an instance in last summer's heatwave of a freezer that was full of evidence which broke, meaning that alleged cases of rape then had to be dropped because the evidence had been lost. There was discrimination towards female colleagues, sexual inappropriate behaviour in the office. A Sikh officer had his beard trimmed. A Muslim officer found bacon in his boots. Almost 1 in 5 Met Police officers had surveyed or personally experienced homophobia in the ranks as well. So it really does make for damning reading. And this report suggests 16 changes to radically improve the Metropolitan Police Force. But Baroness Casey did warn that this boys' club culture, as she called it, is rife and that it could take years to change. But she did warn that if it isn't changed in the next 5 years, then the force could be abolished.
Ellie, how helpful then do you think the response so far from the Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, that he's not accepting the language she's used, the phrases institutional racism, homophobic and misogyny? How helpful is it that he is nitpicking over some of the language, given the criticisms in the report, do you think?
Well, Mark Rowley has been very open about the huge challenge in front of him in order to tackle abuse against women and these sorts of things that we're hearing about today, racism and misogyny in the ranks. He has warned that we will see 2 to 3 police officers in court every week for the foreseeable whilst he tries to clear the swamp, so to speak. But he has taken issue with the language of Baroness Casey. He does admit that the reading is ghastly. He says that it caused many emotions in him, including anger, frustration and embarrassment, but he doesn't want to use the words institutional. He says that's because it's not practical. He says he's a practical man and he wants to look at the good police officers in the ranks, the good work that they're doing, and he says they continue to be the majority of the police officers serving Londoners. But let's have a listen to the language that he took issue with.
Accepting her language in terms of the bullets of the diagnosis of what we've got wrong. I'm just simply not wrapping it up in the same label. We are going to be anti-racist, anti-misogynist, anti-homophobic. I've stepped up massively our capability in our professional standards department. Our men and women in the organisation are reporting more incidents. We are sacking officers at a faster rate because of their help. So we are making the progress that people would expect us to do. It's going to take us some time, but we are slowly reducing the risk that we have people in the organisation who don't have the integrity the public would expect.
Well, in terms of response to this report, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, said it was clear that there had been serious failings in the Metropolitan Police Force. She said that Sir Mark Rowley had been working to restore confidence in policing in London. And she does add that the government is also driving towards work to improve culture, standards and behaviour across policing, including strengthening vetting and reviewing the dismissals process. But she does mention an overriding theme there, which is the theme of trust. And there was a YouGov poll out in February which showed that just 6% of Londoners trusted the Metropolitan Police Force wholeheartedly. So there is a long way to go in terms of trust and confidence and pride in order to reinstil that in the UK's biggest police force.
Ellie, thank you very much indeed. We go to Steve Turner. Steve is the Police and Crime Commissioner for Cleveland in Yorkshire. Steve, the danger is this is about the Met, but there is a big danger that people could apply it to all police forces, is there not?
There is. Good morning to you both. I think that's my biggest concern with this. It's no surprise in policing that if Met sneezes, the rest of the police forces in the country get cold. And what we don't want is the public looking at this and assuming that every police force is the same as the Met, because quite frankly, it's not.
Then that the police force that you are associated with doesn't have any of these problems?
No, I think it would be naive to say there are no problems in the police forces, but I would stand categorically and say that my force isn't institutionally racist, misogynistic or homophobic.
Well, Steve, what are the lessons to be learned? What can you apply to make sure people see it that way?
I think what we've got to do is what my force has done, and Dame Casey was right. On the back of the Sarah Everard, I think most of us took a long, hard look at what we were doing and what our forces were doing. And as Police and Crime Commissioner, we have the opportunity to scrutinise that, to demand of our police forces a standard that they need to live up to. And that's what most of us are doing. I think the problem you have in the Met is the mayoral system for scrutinising police forces just really doesn't work. People like Sadiq Khan and Andy Burnham are elected on what they can do for their cities and their regions, and quite frankly, policing becomes further down their list of priorities. Where we just have a police and crime commissioner in place, that is my priority, that is my day job, that is what I do every single day to make sure that the public of Cleveland are well served, the victims are looked after, and the force is scrutinised appropriately.
So let me ask you, Steve, what are you being asked to do, or are you being asked to do anything that you think that the police shouldn't be asked to do?
I think policing across the country, we've got a big challenge right now with what the police have been asked to do in terms of supporting mental health victims, supporting things that, quite frankly, aren't policing related. In the Met, I think the problem is bigger than that. The Met has national responsibility for things like close protection, for counter-terrorism, and I personally think, rather than talking about disbanding the Met or breaking it up, and I think there are arguments for parts of it to go into surrounding forces, I think the first thing we need to do is allow it to get back on with focusing on policing, and that means taking some of those national responsibilities away from them and giving them an agency like the NCA.
Police and Crime Commissioner for Cleveland in Yorkshire, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
The Democratic Unionist Party has said it will not support a key part of Rishi Sunak's Windsor framework.
MPs will be given a chance to vote on the so-called stormont break on Wednesday, but the DUP leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, said the party had unanimously agreed to vote against it.
Downing Street has said there are no plans for substantial change to the deal. So where does that leave the Prime Minister, the DUP and Brexit plans?
Well, joining us now to discuss all of this is the Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood, as well as the former Brexit Minister and GB News presenter, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Let's start with you, Jacob. Where does this leave the Windsor framework?
Well, it's obviously difficult because the main point of the Windsor framework was to get Stormont up and running, and Stormont will not be up and running following the DUP saying they will vote against the motion tomorrow.
And do you think that the DUP have a justified objection, or as some commentators are saying, is their version of Brexit so pure it's almost like a unicorn version of it that will never be achievable?
No, I think their basic point is that the country voted as the United Kingdom to leave, and the problem with the Northern Ireland Protocol and the Windsor framework is that it leaves Northern Ireland still subject to a degree of EU interference and rules. And the Green Lane, so-called, if you come into the Green Lane into the United Kingdom from abroad, you have no checks, nothing, you just walk through. You may be stopped, but you walk through. With the Green Lane from GB to Northern Ireland, part of the same country, you will have to fill out a form that requires 21 pieces of information. So there is a big barrier remaining, even under the Windsor framework, between GB and Northern Ireland.
But that being said, Downing Street have made it clear they're not going to make any changes to the Windsor framework. You can clearly see the problems that the DUP have with it. There are 8 members of Parliament from DUP who will clearly not vote in favour of this Stormont break tomorrow. Where will you sit on that vote? And do you think there could be quite a big rebellion from the Conservative Party on this in the light of their objections?
Well, we'll have to see. There are a couple of things that are going to happen. First of all, later on today, Bill Cash and his team will reveal their analysis of what the Windsor framework really does, what it does in legal terms. Now, I know a few of the highlights of that. So we've been told 97% of EU law will not apply in Northern Ireland, but that actually means no extra law will be removed. So it's 0 laws that currently apply that will no longer be applied. So this will see through some of the spin surrounding the Windsor framework, and then the fact that the DUP are voting against will be influential. Against that, the Tories are picking up a bit in the opinion polls, and Tory MPs want to support the leader of the party as far as is practicable.
And so I'm going to push you. How are you going to vote on it?
I'll tell people at 8 o'clock this evening if they tune into my own show.
On your own show. You can't blame me for trying.
Not at all.
Tom, what do the DUP hope to achieve by not voting or by voting against this? Jacob has just said that the main objective of the Stormont break was to get the devolved government up and running. Clearly, that's not been the case.
It's not been achieved, however, it also has not been ruled out. And I think this is a very important point. This vote, this specific vote on the Stormont break, as it's so called, whilst the government is trying to say that this is a wider vote, an indicative vote on terms of the entire Windsor framework, I think one of the reasons why the DUP has been feeling able to say on this specific issue we can cast a judgment simply because there is. I think one of the reasons why the DUP is saying this is because there is this now specificity of issue rather than the whole.
Tom, I hate to interrupt you. But we had this problem yesterday.
I'm sorry, there's a problem with your microphone. It seems to be the
As there
unlucky
was at the
microphone
same time yesterday in the same
yeah.
place. There we go.
We've got to ask you, Jacob, about Boris. I'm so
me.
sorry.
I don't quite have the hair to be
Well,
Boris,
it's interesting because obviously we're talking about this Stormont break vote tomorrow, but also we have this big parliamentary hearing where Boris Johnson will be giving evidence. Some people describing it as a kangaroo court and his allies saying that it's impossible, that it's biased and prejudiced. Where do you stand on it all?
It was clearly biased. The chairman of the committee had said before she was made the chairman of it, Harriet Harman, that she thought Boris hadn't told the truth. She tweeted it out. One of the other Labour members of the committee gave a list of 10 lies Boris had told. So you've got a completely partial leadership of the committee, and you've had a situation where there's been determination to try and get Boris. And I think this is not a good way to proceed. I think it's a very bad thing to do politically. It's very American that you go for political leaders because you disagree with them rather than because they've actually done anything wrong. And it's really striking that yesterday was the 20th anniversary of Iraq. Has Tony Blair been hauled up in front of a committee for something that led to hundreds of thousands of deaths, one of the worst failures of British foreign policy in modern times, and not a squeak out of a committee on that, and yet Boris Johnson for a piece of cake? This is just ridiculous and disproportionate.
But to be fair, this parliamentary committee was set up unanimously by the Commons. Not a single MP objected to it. That interim report by them found 4 occasions where they believed that the former Prime Minister did mislead Parliament. Now, whether or not you agree that to be true, there couldn't be more important principle at stake, and clearly a rigorous investigation has to be done into it because it's the seat of democracy.
The Prime Minister corrected the record when he knew the record was wrong, but I was a minister at the time. I was prepared for business questions as leader of the House. During the period of Partygate, every week I was being told the rules were followed at all times. That was the briefing ministers were receiving.
So do you think this is Jack Doyle's fault? That's what we're led to believe the former Prime Minister will say tomorrow?
It's not a question of whose fault it was. That was what actually was believed in Downing Street. That's what the Prime Minister and other ministers were told was the case. And we know perfectly well that some things took place when the Prime Minister was not in Downing Street, he was at Chequers. Some of the things took place in the Cabinet Office, which is a different and separate building. So that side of it, I think, is pretty bogus. It is a political hatchet job on the Prime Minister, led by somebody who prejudged it. And bear in mind, the first chairman of the committee, Chris Bryant, recused himself because he'd already expressed his views. Vernon Bogdan, a very distinguished constitutional historian, perhaps the most distinguished constitutional historian in the country, has said that Harriet Harman should recuse herself for the same reason.
Should Sue Gray have excused herself?
Well, Sue Gray's report is now valueless because we know it was done by somebody who's party pre. So the whole basis of the evidence on which the committee was set up is rotten. If this were a criminal case, if it were going before our courts and you'd found that the whole investigation, like the freezer we were talking about that had broken, had been invalidated, the prosecution would collapse. No evidence would be offered. And that's what the Privileged Committee should be doing. It should say, the whole basis of the evidence is flawed, it's wrong, and we're not going to proceed with this kangaroo court. Though I think it's pretty offensive to kangaroos, actually.
Just lastly, you'll be hoping that he will make a comeback after all of this tomorrow. I mean, where do you see this ending up if he's successful?
Well, Boris Johnson is one of the most notable political figures of our time. Look at the interest in him. You know, we've spent more time on Boris Johnson than we have on the Northern Ireland Protocol. He is the big colossus of British political life, and the people who don't like Brexit don't like this, and they're going to carry on taking potshots at him, but he's pretty armour-plated.
Jacob Rees-Mogg, a.k.a. Boris Johnson. Thank you. Tom, we've got you back in the ring again.
I now have 2 microphones
just in case.
My lapel, just in case.
OK, what would you like to add to anything you've just heard?
Is it a kangaroo court?
I think that there are some genuine issues with the composition of this body, because not least it needs to have confidence. It needs to have confidence across the House. It needs to have confidence across the country for anything it says to be taken seriously. And also, I think I would add that we have now been waiting
over 18 hours for this dossier of evidence that was submitted to this committee yesterday by those around Boris Johnson. We've been waiting for this committee to publish this dossier of evidence, and they have not yet done so. I think there are big questions as to why the public aren't able to see this evidence in the eyes of the committee when they can. That raises some questions as well around all
Okay.
Thank
Tom, thank you very much indeed. Jacob, thank you.
Thank you.
Show tonight, what time?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, be there, be square. 23 minutes past 8. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The sister of a head teacher who took her own life after an Ofsted inspection says her death was a direct result of the deeply harmful report and the pressure of the process. Ruth Perry was the head of Caversham Primary School in Reading, and she killed herself in January whilst awaiting the review, which gave her school the lowest possible rating.
To the trains, and members of the RMT network have voted to accept an offer covering paid jobs and conditions. Staff will receive a pay rise between 9.2 and 14.4%, and they have increased back pay as well. The union says its 20,000 members voted 76% in favour of the new deal.
Damage caused by potholes has forced almost 2.7 million cars off the road in the past year. Car servicing company QuickFit says the average repair bill is around £130 per driver. Breaking news to bring you in relation to this damning report into the Metropolitan Police. In the last few moments, the Home Secretary has issued her thoughts, having had the chance now to take a look at what Baroness Louise Casey had to say.
She says, I will continue to hold the Commissioner to account to deliver a wholesale change in the force's culture. There's much more to do, and the task of rooting out unfit officers means that further unacceptable cases will come to light. But in defence of serving police officers, she says we shouldn't however overlook the many officers working in the Met who carry out their duties with the utmost professionalism.
We will be speaking to a representative from Labour in around 20 minutes' time. They have their own views on what needs to be done. Suella Braverman saying the government is also driving forward work to improve culture standards and behaviour. We will ask them if they agree.
Club versus country, a potentially big blow for England football team as Marcus Rashford ruled out of the qualifiers, the Euro qualifiers, because of an injury. Paul Coyte has that and more next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 8:29. Still to come on the programme this morning. How would Labour reform the Met after that report? We'll be asking the Shadow Minister for Policing at 8:45. And then after 9 o'clock, Eve Pollard will be joining us in the studio with her take on the potential political comeback of Boris Johnson. And don't forget that you can get in touch on any of the topics that we are discussing this morning. You can email us, gbnews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Quick look through the back pages of the newspapers as we hit the sport. The Mail reports that the FA are preparing to hit Fulham striker Mitrovic with the harshest possible punishments following his physical altercation with a referee. The Times returns to the ongoing Antonio Conte saga at Tottenham, the paper reporting that their manager has lost the dressing room. And finally, the Express focuses on the latest injury woes for England. Marcus Rashford forced to withdraw from the upcoming Euro qualifiers against Italy and Ukraine, which is delightful news for his club.
It is delightful news for his club. This is the thing, isn't it? I mean, I bet you're over the moon that he's not going to be playing because
nobody's
they're going to need him.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. You know, there's always the club versus country row, and often you don't want, especially with like a qualifier like this, is it that important that he's playing? So Rashford's out, so at least you know he'll be safe for Manchester United.
I'm not saying it's not an injury, but I'm saying that very few clubs will object to their under-pressure players being withdrawn from those squads for friendlies.
Exactly. So many games, World Cup. Injuries are likely to happen as well.
Yeah.
But the real big news is Roy Hodgson,
yes,
which has just been appointed. So which is interesting. So you've got Patrick Vieira is making way for a much older man to take over.
And it's a return for Roy Hodgson.
It is a return.
The question is, can he, sort out their woes and keep them in the league?
Well, they obviously think yes, because I think it's tough on Patrick Vieira. OK, they hadn't won in 12, but this was a very good young manager. They've had injuries, but he's gone on Friday. But it's that panic, you see. You don't want to leave the Premier League. It's so important. But the thing is, there's also so many clubs that are around the same amount of points. And obviously Crystal Palace thinking, what do we do? What do we do? And I don't know whether Roy phones up and says, well, here I am available, I could do something for you. So 75 years old, comes in with Ray Lewington, his much younger assistant at 66.
Well, he's got to keep them up now.
He absolutely has to.
The thing is, for Vieira, though, there may well be a vacancy at your club.
I can't see an Arsenal legend like Patrick Vieira coming. Can you imagine?
Well, Pat Jennings...
Pat Jennings is a Spurs legend.
He went the other way. That was OK. He went Spurs to Arsenal.
To Arsenal, and that was kind of like that's a long story. But I think with Patrick Vieira, I don't think Spurs would be happy. I don't think Patrick with Vieira would ever dream of it. But with Antonio Conte, of course, this saga continues. So we're still waiting to see whether he's actually going to get the bullet. It's expected that this week a decision is going to be made that Antonio, because he's gone straight back to Italy, said a lot about the players, said, you know, that they weren't playing for them. They weren't. It just really went to town. We saw all that yesterday. So really, I think it's pretty much untenable. I can't see that he can help.
Whatever the penalty is he will face, Alexander Mitrovic, a sort of standard 3-match ban ain't going to apply to him, is it?
Well, we did talk about this yesterday, didn't we? And 3 matches is not going to be enough for violent conduct. So not only for the fact that he was breaking the rules, but also for what it shows, not only other players, but also what it shows people that are playing football every day and the referees. I was talking to Keith Hackett, legendary referee, actually only yesterday, and he was saying the same thing, because we see it on the pitches all around the country every day, that there are very few referees that are coming through. And when...
Who would do it?
Well, I agree, because it's a completely thankless task. And the thing is, when you're seeing professionals are getting treated like that, and I don't care whether they say, oh, well, it's only influences kids. It doesn't influence kids. Actually, it influences adults as well. They're doing the same thing. So throw the book at Mitrovic. So it could be until the end of the season, 10 matches. I think it's going to be a big ban that he's going to face after doing what he did, because it can't carry on.
When you think about it, who would be a referee?
No, I know, but I think people who wanted to be professional footballers but couldn't quite make it, and they love the game.
Or people who'd like to be a traffic warden or a police officer.
I don't know. I can understand people wanting to be referees. I think it's quite...
There are those sorts of referees.
They get a lot of grief.
They do. I mean,
they get to run around and get up close with the players, you know.
It's maybe the next best thing, but kids' football, and I'm sure you've seen it as well with kids' football, you see the way parents react to screaming, and even kids screaming and shouting at these referees.
The pressure to get that decision right all the time, and you're not a computer.
It is tough. It's really, really tough.
Anyway, thanks, Paul. Thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it.
Right, stay with us. We are going to be going through the papers. We've got Martin Daubney and Davinia Taylor coming back for one last look through.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians
to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
22 minutes before 9 o'clock, time to go through the papers. Journalist and former breakfast party.
Breakfast party? Sounds good.
Should be a breakfast
I'm
party.
up for a breakfast party. We're having a breakfast party right now.
Well, we could be in it. We could qualify for that breakfast party. But anyway, it's the Brexit party. MEP... Well, actually, let's tell a deal. If he was a former anything, let's get rid of it. I don't want to know what he was a former. I want to know what he is now. He is Martin Dobney, and we've got the actress and well-being guru, Davinia Taylor. Davinia, we're going to start with Meghan and Harry, and we're talking about genders, and we're talking about how they want to influence these things. It is their new project.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's going to be a huge sort of money trail that leads back to them on this one. However, what concerns me, I've got 4 boys, and they're insinuating that before birth, boys are inherently toxic and toxic masculinity. And if I'm not kidding, if somebody
before birth.
Before birth, yes. So
it's like a ritual sin.
Yeah. It's like a sin being born a boy.
Yeah.
And I really love my boys. They're extremely cuddly, extremely affectionate, and whatever they decide to identify when they're older is fine by me. But right now, my boys are not toxic. Do not put that in their subconscious that they are toxic. And if anybody tries to insinuate that they are, I will be extremely unladylike and punch them in the jaw.
No, here.
Yes.
Here.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
I've got to stand up for young boys.
I've got 3 sons. My mother had 5 sons. And I will look around and I would say, who are the bad people amongst them? I would find it very hard to do that. Your boy, look at your little lad. Would I look at him and say he's a bad person?
No, but I do think in the move to try and stamp out misogyny and in the move to try and better things for girls, we are at risk of, as you say, casting all boys when they're still children themselves as in some way responsible for all of this, and it's not their fault.
You should be a man like me and Martin. We're to blame for everything.
I like
everything.
I'm happy with identifying as a woman.
Me too.
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful, Davinia and Isabel, to hear 2 mothers so passionately stick up for boys. No thanks, because it's so rare in the media to hear that. And what's happening here with the Global Boyhood Initiative, which is a charity which has got its claws into the Sussexes. They have terrible ideas about men being born with the potential to be toxic, irrespective of how they choose to live their life, and they want to change thoughts around gender. That means demonising boys. These terrible ideas now have royal approval. And that's what really, really worries me about this. I was chairing a conference on Saturday for Families Need Fathers, and I met an old friend of mine, Sonia, who runs a charity called Lads Need Dads in Essex. And it's not just about dads, but it's about the positive effect of positive male role models that can be mentors brought into boys' lives whose fathers have died or moved on or been imprisoned or for whatever reasons, has a tangible uptick in their attention, their involvement, their manageability, their educational throughput, their lack of likelihood to be involved in criminality, go to jail, be homeless, drugs. Positive masculinity has a huge, huge role in society. This sort of charity demonises young men. I think it's terrible.
So these 2, what would you say to these 2, Davinia? I mean, now you see Harry and Meghan there and people hugging her and all the downtrodden and the afflicted, and him putting his hands together as if he's some guru there, like in his praying. They do think they're religious, almost.
Well, I mean, obviously they've got someone very strange advising them. I mean, the reality is they don't have a normal life, you know, so they're obviously warped. I do I do the boys' washing, I've got rugby kits, football kits, that's going in constantly all the time. My boys play football in the kitchen, things get broken. We live in a very male traditionally male house, and I'm happy with it. I will not question my boys' instincts to run outside, to let off steam, to shout at each other. I mean, they make friends really quickly. There's no sort of, like, undercurrent or manipulation with my boys, and I like them that way. I mean, forgive me for being them. They're simple, they're easy, and they're loving. And I'm happy with that. I don't need these two guys who've got nannies, au pairs, chefs, personal shoppers advising me on how to talk to my boys.
Okay.
They are lads, and I love them.
Right. So, yes, there we go. That's very, very good. Martin, a teacher discovered police had recovered a non-crime hate incident against her over social media posts.
It's back to the big story today about the rot within the Met. What's the role of the police? Is it their job to police the streets, or is it their job to police the tweets? And what's happened here is that an English teacher, a 57-year-old lady called Kathy Kirby, who lives in Norfolk. She's a feminist, she's an activist, she cares passionately about women's safety, women's rights. She took objection to the changing of the old-fashioned pride flag, as it were old-fashioned, into the one with the trans inclusionary colours. And a colleague complained, and she had recorded against her name a non-crime hate incident. So it's not an actual crime, but somebody was offended, therefore it's logged as a crime. Now, being a teacher, this, of course, goes on her DBS background check. Therefore, it would affect her ability to work, to have a livelihood. She had to fight against the police, who completely took the complainant's side to restore her goodwill. This is another example of the world's gone mad in terms of if I'm offended, it becomes a crime. I think it erodes public trust in the police. It destroys lives. And another example of how the trans ideology is invading schools and poisoning lots of minds. I think we need an urgent review of what this is doing to our children. Toxic masculinity being taught as truth. It's not. It's a made-up social science. Patriarchy, trans pronouns, all the rest of it. We need to just think what's actually best for children, rather than teaching this, as you said, Eamonn, as a new religion.
Yeah, and also, you know, to have the stamina and, I suppose, the financial means to be able to fight your corner. A lot of people just be beaten by being, you know, found guilty of something, or, you know, and, even if it's not, you know, if it's not fair, having to, you know what I'm trying to say. It's difficult to fight these things.
Absolutely right. It's expensive, it's time-consuming, and the punishment, the process is the punishment. Now, being accused of being a transphobe, being ostracised socially, professionally, is in itself a punishment, even when you're not guilty. It needs to stop. It's ruining ordinary lives.
OK. Where do we want to go next? Davinia, let's look at seagulls. This is the front of the Star this morning. I hate seagulls.
Rats with wings.
Yeah.
Do you know what? They're getting more cocky, apparently.
Yeah.
So they're not just at the seaside now, they are coming inland. So I live in the Ribble Valley, which on a clear day I can see Blackpool Tower, but we get seagulls. I mean, they're like pterodactyls. They're huge, these things, and now they are attacking people for their fish and chips.
You know they're related to pterodactyls.
Are they?
Yeah. All birds are descended from dinosaurs.
Oh, right, OK.
Dinosaurs used to have feathers.
That explains a lot, then.
Yeah.
But they're huge. The wingspan's massive. So I just thought that was interesting to just look to the skies, you know. I wanted to also talk about Victoria Beckham.
Oh, go on then.
OK.
Yeah.
Just because I've known Victoria for many, many years, and I'm really pleased now that she's turning a profit with her fashion empire, because I felt like the whole of Britain was against her succeeding, you know, and it was like, oh, she's got everything. Why is she doing this? She's not a qualified designer, but boy, is her stuff fabulous. And she's kind of accessed that market by doing accessories and makeup. And I'm really pleased to see a British woman, you know, fighting the good cause and having a successful business, because it's a very toxic place for women to be in business, and particularly if it's not your... Well, she was a singer, she was a performing artist, and to just change direction was fabulous, and to stick with it, to fight the fight and do something that she believes in.
But, Davina, you say everyone was against her. I mean, in circles that I am in,
The fashion
everyone
industry.
Wanted that dress. Oh, you mean there was a snobbishness
there
from
was
the
a snobbish,
fashion...
the backlash.
Right.
I thought that was really unfair, because, you know, they'd use her to wear their clothes, but as soon as she... I mean, she's obviously been around fashion all her life, and that's her passion. And just because she went in a different direction to what she was known for, she got a real backlash, so I'm really happy for her. I just wish she'd do a collaboration with, like, H&M so everyone could get it.
Yeah, so it's funny how in this article they're talking about Stella McCartney. Well, guess how she got her in? Through her dad, who was also a musician. So of all people, she ought to appreciate you can be a musician and
you evolve as you get older. Something takes your fancy. You know, I used to... I'm now in the wellbeing industry, you know, and I really get behind what I talk about. But But I started off as an actor, and that is the opposite of well-being, I can assure you, you know. So you can evolve and you can change, so
I
good on her.
do think her dresses are absolutely stunning. They're sort of like Roland Mouret-style dresses. I mean, I can't afford them.
No, I can't.
But that's another matter. But I have to say, I do see all her makeup being advertised all the time, and that must be quite a canny sort of
isn't it?
Kardashian kind of move. That's how
I do
Kylie made her
I do
empire.
have to say, in terms of clothes and accessories, there's one British designer who consistently outsells her on QVC, and that is Ruth Langsford.
There you go, you see?
Do you know why that is?
Why is that?
Because Victoria Beckham doesn't sell on QVC.
They shift volumes, right?
So that leaves
Let's
Ruth
get
free.
Victoria on
Ruth free
QVC,
there.
she will make $1 billion.
She would. Davinia, lovely talking to you. Martin, lovely talking to you as well. Guys, come back again soon.
You didn't want your say on Victoria Beckham dresses, though.
Well, actually, I have a quick story about it. Our eyes once met at TV Awards in 1995, and I think...
Your eyes and who?
Victoria Beckham.
Oh, right. I thought you were talking about my wife there for a minute.
I think there was a certain attraction, and Victoria's life could have turned out much, much different, much worse. Yeah, she did the right thing by marrying David. Yeah.
There we go. Crikey. Thank you very much, both of you.
12 minutes now before 9 o'clock. Look, we're featuring it heavily all morning, this damning report into the Met Police. Awful terms, institutionally racist, misogynistic, homophobic. The Labour Party has said the Home Secretary must reassure the public and address these failings immediately. So let's now go and get the thoughts of the Labour Shadow Policing Minister, Sarah Jones. Sarah, it's an awful read, it's an awful report for the Met Police. How would you like to respond to that?
Well, I would pay tribute to Dame Louise Casey for this report. She spent a year and left no stone unturned. And what she's found is that the police is not capable of policing itself, that we have let down women, that neighbourhood policing has been disbanded, essentially, and that the institutional racism, misogyny and homophobia is still there. So this is a wake-up call for us all. She has suggested a 2-year period for the Met to consider and to change fundamentally the way that they act and lead, and at that point, if the Met hasn't made the changes that it needs to, then we need to look at more fundamental change to the Met. What Labour has said is there is a role there for the Met, of course, but there is also a role for government. We need national standards that are mandatory on vetting and misconduct. If an officer is being investigated for domestic abuse, for example, they should automatically be suspended. There is a role for government to step in there, and we must bring back neighbourhood policing, because that is what gives us policing by consent. It is the trust that you have in your local officers that builds that trust, and we must get to grips with the awful situation when it comes to violence against women and girls that Louise Casey outlined. Fridges defrosting with vital evidence in it so that women cannot get justice from when they've been raped. Lack of specialist officers saying they can't get any case to court because they are so overwhelmed with the number of cases they are dealing with. I think fundamentally what Louise Casey is saying is that policing attracts the best of humanity, but it will also attract predators, just like we know could happen in education or in medicine, and we have to put in place those structures to make sure any predator is not in the police force in the first place, but is removed as quickly as possible if they are. All of that will take time, but we mustn't let this report just sit on a shelf. This has to be a wake-up moment for us all.
Right, and do you think that Mark Rowley, the Commissioner, is the correct man to be doing that? Do you still have faith in him? I mean, we've heard from the government this morning saying that he largely agrees with the substance of this report, but he's refusing, isn't he, to accept the language of institutional misogyny, racism and homophobia. But actually, it's important, the language that the Baroness has chosen, and if he's refusing to ignore the chosen words, is he actually part of this culture of denial that the Baroness has exposed in this?
Well, she has looked at this for a year. She has looked at all the statistics. If you're a black officer, you're 81% more likely to be to be disciplined. If you're a woman, you are 10% of women working in the Met have reported sexual harassment. But when it comes to misconduct, it's sexual harassment claims that are the least likely to lead to an outcome. So the facts are there for all to see. Whatever you call it, there is institutional racism, misogyny in the police force. We have let down women, we are letting down Londoners, and we are letting down the good police officers who are trying to do their job but are really stymied by lack of resources. So there is a huge job of work to be done here.
Yeah,
that
but forgive me,
starts
the
with
question
accepting
was,
the
do you
findings
have
of the
faith in the
report
Commissioner?
and that ends with... Yes, forgive me, the mic is very quiet, so I'm struggling to hear you. I do have faith in the Commissioner, as Louise Casey does too. He has been brought in relatively recently, and he has to be given time to make the changes that we need to see. He needs support from government. They need to intervene. They have stepped back from policing over the last 13 years, pushed the blame, pushed the responsibility onto local police forces not doing what they should. The report says that austerity has disfigured the Met. They use that language, which is very stark. We need to get our police back in our neighbourhoods. We need to be supporting women when they come forward as victims of violence, and we need to root out any predators who are working in our police force. We have to have a situation where girls can be confident to go up to police officers. And hello.
Sarah. Hello.
Yes.
I just wanted to say we're talking about faith. Hello. We're talking about faith in the Metropolitan Police there. I don't know about you, but I see this report and I say, this just can't apply to the Met Police. If it's applying to the Met Police, it's applying to Lancashire Police, Yorkshire Police, whatever is in Scotland Police, Northern Ireland, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, whatever. It's bound to be there. You also are the Shadow Minister for the Fire Service, and I would say that's an organisation that probably needs looked at as well. Would you advocate, or would you be looking that this sort of report be applied to different organisations and different police forces around the country now? Just briefly.
Yes, absolutely, and forgive me for not being able to hear you when you're trying to ask me questions. Absolutely, this is a national problem, and Louise Casey makes that point in her report. Obviously, she's looked at the Met, that's where the lens is shining today, but we need national standards. There is a postcode lottery at the moment on how vetting is done, on how misconduct is done, on how training is done. That cannot be right. We have to have good standards when it comes to the police that we recruit, the way we train them, the way we support them to do their job, and there's a lot in this report about them, mental health support that we need to give our officers who are dealing with incredibly difficult situations. This is a national problem. That's why the government needs to take a role.
Sarah Jones, really appreciate your perspective. Sarah's the Shadow Minister for Policing and the Fire Service. Thank you very much indeed. Sorry about your earpiece as well.
Stay with us though. Eve Pollard will be here in the studio giving us her take on that Metropolitan Police report.
But first, let's have a look at the weather forecast on this Tuesday morning. This is especially for Isabel's mother, who missed it in the past hour. Here's Craig Snell. Craig, morning.
Hello, I'm Craig Snell, and here is your latest forecast from the Met Office. Well, as we look ahead to today, really the overnight rain will clear to the east, leaving most of us with a mixture of sunshine and scattered showers. So here's a bigger picture. We've got this huge area of low pressure really dominating the Atlantic. This weather front is the front responsible for the overnight rain, but you can see that is clearing off towards the east. But this next weather front will then move in as we go into the afternoon. So after a damp start across the east, most of us actually seeing a day of sunny spells and scattered showers. Showers potentially quite heavy across parts of Scotland, down into northern England and the Midlands. Could even see a few rumbles of thunder here too. But out towards the west, after maybe a few bright spells around lunchtime, it does turn cloudier with some outbreaks of rain arriving by the evening rush hour. But for most of us, it's going to be a fairly mild day. Could potentially see 16 degrees down towards the southeast in any sunshine. Into the evening, this band of rain will work its way eastwards right across the country. Quite heavy and persistent at times across parts of Wales and northern England, especially over the high ground, and be accompanied by quite a brisk wind. Could turn quite blustery for a time, especially along some coastal areas down towards the south. But for all of us, it's going to be a fairly mild one once again. Some places in the south could potentially stay up into double figures. And then into Wednesday, quite a grey, damp day across many southern parts of the country. That rain will eventually clear all but the southeast as we go into the afternoon. So actually Midlands, Wales, maybe southwest England, a promising afternoon to come, where Northern Ireland and Scotland, really, it's going to be a day of sunny spells and scattered showers. But once again, temperatures on the mild side, a little bit down compared to Tuesday, but still highs reaching around 14, possibly 15 degrees in the south. Thursday and Friday, we remain unsettled. Further showers or longer spells of rain to come. But temperatures for most staying in double figures, so at least feeling mild.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, I'm Michael Portillo. You can join me every Sunday on GB News. Remember to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel and to download the GB News app to stay up to date with the latest GB News content. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Racist, sexist, homophobic and broken. That's the verdict of a damning new report into the country's largest police force, as Suella Braverman holds the Commissioner to account.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Good to see you. Good to have you on board. The time, 1 minute past 9. Tuesday, 21st of March. Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Whichever way you look at it, whichever label or description, the evidence is absolutely clear that as an institution, are they prejudiced and discriminatory? Yes, they are.
Report.
A landmark new report into the Metropolitan Police has recommended that the force be abolished in 5 years if it doesn't change what it refers to as a rotten culture.
Well, the Home Secretary says it's absolutely clear that the leadership of the Metropolitan Police has been failing. She says she's going to be holding the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Mark Rowley, to account to ensure the Metropolitan Police can become a service that people can trust.
The Democratic Unionist Party has said it will not support the government's Windsor framework. The party's leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, said the decision to vote against what is called the Stormont Break was based on ongoing concerns.
Boris Johnson has submitted a dossier of evidence in his defence ahead of a grilling tomorrow over whether he lied to Parliament. It comes amid speculation that he's planning a political comeback if he's cleared by the inquiry.
The rail union, the RMT, has voted to accept a new pay offer from Network Rail, an agreement that will bring some strikes to an end. Members voted overwhelmingly in favour, which represents a 9% pay rise over 2 years. The Transport Secretary told us earlier on the programme that he hopes the same progress can be made with other transport unions.
Stage is that I want the RMT to put what is broadly the same fair and reasonable offer to their members that work for the train operating companies and call off next week's strike. So I think that would be fantastic news for the travelling public.
And a new report into potholes has found that almost half of Britain's roads are crumbling, with 2.7 million cars forced off the road in the past year. It estimates the cost of the road repair backlog to be approximately £14 billion.
That was billion, she said. This cost of living crisis has sparked what is called a pong-demic, right? 30% of adults are curtailing their showering as prices soar so that they will use less hot water. A third of those cutting back are even turning off the water when it's not needed, such as when conditioning their hair. See, I haven't... What? You do need water when you condition your hair.
No, because you have to leave it in for 2 to 3 minutes. So you could put it in, you could turn the shower off, you could, for example, shave your legs or something whilst you're waiting for the conditioner to do its thing, then turn the shower back on and sorted. Save yourself some pennies in the process.
Right. 11% of people are now using dry shampoo instead of washing. I think these people will be easy to identify through smell.
The pong-demic, in case you didn't catch it with the accent there.
Have you been out jogging this morning?
Oh, shush.
Back after this.
OK, it's our top story today. A damning new report into the Metropolitan Police has found it to be institutionally racist, misogynistic and homophobic.
Now, it was conducted by Baroness Louise Casey. It was an independent review. She also called the force rotten, adding that she couldn't guarantee there aren't more officers like Sarah Everard's killer, Wayne Couzens, in the ranks.
Well, earlier we spoke to Mark Harper from the government, who told us the Met needs to change.
Louise Casey has said herself, and she's written this very hard-hitting and troubling report. She says that both the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner, she thinks they absolutely understand and accept the scale of the challenge that they face in the Met. She thinks that they are up to the job of fixing the problems, and she says that they should be given the chance to get on and do it, and she thinks that they will be successful, and that we should all back them in the very significant changes they've got to make. And I think it's the substance, and watching what the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner do to change the culture, the work they've already done. They have got a massive task on their hands, but Louise herself says that they will get the work done, and we should all back them in the essential changes they need to make in the Met.
Well, let's speak to our reporter, Ellie Costello, who is at Scotland Yard for us this morning. Ellie, could you tell us how the Home Secretary has responded to this? She's released a statement.
Yes, she has. She's released a statement this morning in response to that damning report into the Metropolitan Police that found racism, sexism and homophobia at the heart of the force. This is the statement she shared this morning. It is clear that there's been serious failings in the Metropolitan Police, in its culture and in its leadership, which is why the Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has been taking action to restore confidence in policing in London. She goes on to say that she will be holding Sir Mark Rowley to account in order order to deliver a wholesale change in the force's culture. She admits that there's a lot of work to do and a lot of rooting out of unfit officers, and there will be many unacceptable cases that come to light in the meantime. She says that we shouldn't overlook the hard-working officers in the Met that carry out their duties with utmost professionalism and have been let down by the failures of others. And she goes on to say that the government is driving forward work to improve culture, standards and behaviour across policing, including strengthening, vetting and reviewing the dismissals process. Now, of course, she was responding to that 363-page report by Baroness Casey, which found racism, sexism and homophobia to be institutional in the Metropolitan Police Force. The Met's Commissioner, Mark Rowley, has been responding to that as well this morning. He started with an apology to Londoners. He said that reading the report was ghastly and invoked a lot of emotions within him, including anger, frustration and embarrassment. But he did take aim at the word institutionalised. He didn't want to use that word. He actually prefers the use of the word systemic when speaking about racism, misogyny and homophobia within the Met Police Force ranks. He admits there are hundreds of problematic officers, but he says the majority of them are doing a fantastic job. So there is criticism this morning, Eamonn and Isabel, that if Sir Mark Rowley cannot accept the true extent of the issues in the Metropolitan Police Force, then how can he be expected to make the changes that Baroness Casey says are so desperately needed?
Ellie, thanks very much indeed.
Let's speak now to the former newspaper editor, Eve Pollard. Right, Baroness Sue Casey and this report. What do you think?
I'm so old that I remember the Macpherson report, which was produced about 24 years ago. And it was mostly about racism because, of course, it was after the terrible murder of...
Stephen Lawrence.
Yes. And it's quite shocking, this report, and without any doubt, I think every woman has felt it's quite shocking that the idea that a policeman could be a murderer, the idea that you would say to your children, to your daughters particularly, if you're in trouble, go to a policeman, turns out to be a murder. But I was reading a report called Fighting Knife Crime, which came out about a year ago, and it said many of these problems. But the problem, it seems to me, about the racism is I first met my policeman at 10 in school. And I don't know why, and this is the trouble, the Met has got so above itself slightly. They're the top of the league, they're earning most, they've got all the toys, they've got all the, drones and everything else. It seems to me that's wrong, and it seems to me that if you don't meet a policeman at school, number one, why don't they go into schools, particularly schools that have a lot of black pupils, and also get the schools to get the parents in? Why don't they talk to one another? When they get to know each other's first name, if somebody's on the beat or in that area, why don't they have a phone line saying, I've just been really badly treated by PC whatever, and you get it sorted there and then. Where the systematic thing comes in, it goes on and repeats itself and repeats itself. I also feel, and I admire Louise Casey in many ways, there is probably some reason why some of the police are so bad. I'm not saying that this report isn't totally accurate. But I was told when I was involved in trying to sort out why women were given such a bad deal when they shouted rape, and the police went and looked at everything about their lives, everything about their phones, basically saying, was this woman a goer, in common parlance, and in which case, could she sue for rape? And the trouble is, I said, this is awful, this is terrible. And then the police would explain, and lawyers better explain, if they don't do that, they go to court and then get taken apart by our legal system. And you wonder about the legal system. So as this is the UK and we're known for our fairness, I would like some police, they may have to not give their names, I'd like some of the Met to explain why they are in this position today, what makes them have to behave so badly, and what we can do to sort it out. Otherwise, we're just kicking it down the road. And in 5 years' time, hopefully, we'll all be here saying how terrible this is.
Well said.
I asked myself this question as well, and I work in an industry. What's the divide? Probably more females, isn't there? Possibly,
don't know.
But there's a huge amount of women. And I've also witnessed in other places where men's relationship when they're in the ascendancy is different towards a woman. The language is different. It's more brutal. It's more direct.
Yes.
Some women react that they want to be one of the boys as well, and they become quite
feisty.
Feisty, and you know, I can tell a dirty joke too, as well as you can, or whatever. I don't know what it is, except it has to be something within the workplace that allows this.
But do you really think breaking up the Metropolitan Police is going to fix it? It sounds to me like that would be expensive, it would be an administrative nightmare, it just creates more little dark corners for things to flourish in. And I, you know, clearly something has to be done. I'm not sure disbanding the Metropolitan Police is the answer.
No, and I also think letting people in. I mean, why don't they let people who have got no axe to grind go and see how the police work? There'd be a lot of retired people would be fascinated to see how the police work and say, can I say the way you spoke to that lady there was really not very nice? Or can I suggest how you might have got a bit further talking to that young boy?
You know, Eve, when you see a London bus pass and they go, was this bus driven carefully? If not, call this number.
Yes.
You could say the same. Was this police officer respectful, trustworthy, all the rest of it? If not, call this number. A bespoke number reporting on bad police behaviour.
Absolutely.
I also just want to say we are taking on board a lot of you saying you don't believe the report was independent. But it is independent, it's officially independent. We're just relaying that. You can have your doubts about it and whatever you want to say, no problem. We're going to talk about potholes now. We don't want to talk about potholes, but they're everywhere.
Britain's gone to pot.
Gone to pot, totally. Half of our roads crumbling. 3 million cars forced off the road in the past year.
And in the last week, in the budget, the Chancellor allocated an extra 200 million, paltry really, to fix roads, but it's estimated the actual amount required is in the tens of billions.
18 billion. Jeff Moody with this story.
They're deep, they're damaging, and they're worse than ever.
They're just everywhere. You literally, every single road you go on, I've just passed my taxi test, and my husband also is a taxi driver, and the roads are absolutely horrendous.
Last month or so I put a claim in because I got a puncture and damaged my alloy. So, yeah, it is really bad to be fair, and I think it's something where everyone needs to really, council really needs to look at really.
Enter North Devon MP Selene Saxby, whose lobbying of the Chancellor resulted in an extra £200 million on top of the £500 million already earmarked to tackle the issue.
I did get a mention in the budget. I had sat down with the Chancellor and also taking back some of the concerns from the Council about the problems of actually fixing potholes. Devon has the longest road network in the whole country by 2,000 miles, so it's massive, and therefore the challenges of getting teams out to fix potholes are much greater. And so whilst I recognise perhaps the County Council would have liked more money, at least we have got some money, and I will continue to work with our County Council to see what else they need to really be able to fix potholes more effectively.
But the Asphalt Industry Alliance says this only scratches the surface.
It's putting a sticking plaster over a much bigger disease, and that disease is that the road has not been maintained properly, and therefore holes have formed within the surface of the road, or the road has just simply reached the end of its natural service life.
48% of UK roads are reported to be in a bad structural condition. 100,000 miles of road will need resurfacing in the next few years, but 37,000 miles of road need resurfacing right now. One pothole is filled every 22 seconds, but after a cold and wet winter, new holes are forming just as quickly as they're filled. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Thanks for all your stories and all your objections and showing us and telling us where the potholes were and what can be done about them. What will be done about it, we don't know.
I've just been having a nice little natter with Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. They will be on, of course, at 9:30 with To The Point. What's coming up in the show?
I'm not telling you that story.
No, I know, I like that
I was telling you just earlier.
Well, we were gossiping about Rupert Murdoch getting married again and why you would do that. I have no idea.
No fool like an old
He's a romantic, maybe.
Or no come on.
Or no fool like an old fool.
Maybe he's
92,
a collector.
for heaven's
likes
sake.
to collect things.
Yeah. You can't blame her.
Why would you?
No, exactly.
I can see why she would, but I'm not sure why he would.
Yeah, I mean, Jerry Hall's got the rock chick lifestyle back now, hasn't she, after just a few years married to them. I met them together and they seemed so happy, Rupert and Jerry.
And he dumped her by text, didn't he? Brutal.
Awful.
Yeah.
We're not talking about that an
right.
awful lot on the show. We might do. I'm sure we'll touch upon it.
Might like the pay review.
We're going to be talking about this, the Casey report and the Met Police and how diabolical that is and how scandalous that is and how nothing has really changed in 24 years since the last damning report post the death of Stephen Lawrence. And also, I did an interview yesterday, a sit-down chat with, do you remember Ellie Williams, the story of the girl who made the false accusations against the Asian rape grooming gang? I sat down yesterday and spoke to one of the victims of her lies, and so we have that interview. He is fascinating.
And it's still amazing, isn't it, that girl was only given an 8.5-year sentence, having destroyed all those lives.
Yeah.
Three men who potentially could... And the mothers kept the money for the crowdfunding money, which was raised for her to have a new life. 23,000?
Yeah.
She's a Labour councillor, I think.
Well, there you go. That's to the point. Andrew and Beverly from 9:30. We've got Eve Pollard here, waiting in the wings to give her thoughts on her former boss, Rupert Murdoch, who you've been hearing about, as he prepares to marry his 5th wife at the age of 92. She's only 66, though.
Looking good on it.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You know what they say, if you want to buy the cow... No, hang on. If you want to buy the calf... God, I've ruined it. If you want to buy the calf, look at the cow, right? So Rupert Murdoch's fiancée should be looking at Rupert Murdoch's mum. She went on to how old, Eve Pollard?
106, I think.
So it's going to be a long marriage if she thought she was,
I don't know why. I'm sorry, you young people, you don't understand. If you are 92, you imagine Rupert's day is probably very busy, running, doing and everything. Then everybody goes. The whole point about being 92 is you need someone to shout at and someone to laugh with. Actually, he never shouted at me. He was charming. But, I mean, in fact, it's a great idea. Why not? Why are we saying to old people, live on your own and be boring? It'll keep him alive. She looks charming.
Yes, and he needs a nurse as well. He needs someone to look after.
Well, we all need a nurse at this stage. Come on.
My wife says to me, I said to her, oh, I'm going to leave you or whatever. And she says, what, for a nurse? Because that's the only thing you're going to need in your life.
But don't you think 5 times, does that not just kind of cheapen marriage?
Look, but he was alive in the time when you used to marry in your 20s. I mean, when I wasn't married by 22, I did get married at 22 in the end. My father was horrified. Are you getting married or not?
All, yeah.
You know, ever. Settle down. Give me grandchildren.
I've got a list of how long his marriages were. 11 years, the first one. 32, the second one. 14, the third one. 6, the fourth one.
But you have no idea. Yeah, but you have no idea if he was dumped or he dumped them.
Well, he dumped Jerry Hall over text message, and she was heartbroken. I have it on good authority.
Did he? I don't know whether that's true.
Yes, I have it on good authority.
Oh, do you? OK, well, we'll talk later.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I think it's great for Rupert, great for her, and I think 92-year-olds should think, would I be happier living with that old lady, who I'm quite friendly with down the road, rather than both of us in our own houses on our own watching the telly?
I totally agree with you. You know, the idea that you would be in a care home with lots of people who you didn't know singing Roll Out the Barrels.
Well, I don't think Rupert would ever be doing that.
Well, he's not doing it, we know that.
No.
So, and he's right, and a very beautiful, classy woman there at 66 years of age.
It's a bit indelicate, but at 92...
Don't you be...
I might prefer to be hanging out with my girlfriends, is all I'm saying.
Well, he might just want to cuddle.
You might, but actually, when you get a gaggle of ladies who very sadly are either divorced or have lost their husband, what would they like most? They'd love a man in their life. I think we've got to stop looking at marriage as the same thing all the way through, but they're probably going to have a great time. Good luck to them.
Could you see yourself doing it again?
Marrying again?
Yeah.
I have to kill him first. No, I couldn't see myself marrying again, but then again, hope springs eternal.
Yeah, yeah.
Who would put up with me?
Well, there'd be somebody, I suppose. I do look at... I'm friendly with Isabel's husband, and there's a lad I feel sorry for. I really do. I really think...
But you know what?
I mean, you're not bad looking.
The feeling's mutual for Ruthie.
But the truth is, people are born to live with one another, and we're better off with somebody to talk to, with someone who shares our most intimate secrets, with somebody who's there to help with children, with grandchildren. We must stop this idea that just because you're old, you're finished.
But, Eve, I bet he gets himself into terrible pickles in the way that Ruth did about your weekend in Venice. And she was reminiscing about, do you remember, darling, when we had that romantic
Ruth live
weekend?
on television, it was a holiday in Venice, and she said, I loved Venice. It was the most romantic weekend of my whole life. It was amazing. Wasn't it, darling? She turned to me and I said, I've never been to Venice. I have no idea.
But I bet he does that all the time. It must be difficult to remember which wife you had which memory with.
No, but that's all right. They all meld in together. As long as you're still alive and laughing, you're ahead.
Yeah. No, I agree. Company, there's a lot to be said. Loneliness is an awful thing.
Awful.
And I think...
And a lot of people in this country suffer it.
Yes.
And they often suffer it because their children don't want them to get married again because they're worried about the money.
Oh, I bet there's some of that.
Yes,
Eve, I bet there's some of that, though. If Succession is based on the Murdoch family, as the rumour has it.
It's not totally based on the Murdoch
But do you think the kids would be happy about fifth wife muscling in on the estate?
Look, the kids live all over the world. They're helping run the business. I think if they think he's happy... Anyway, I don't think he asks them. I think Rupert, who's very clever, very bright, runs his own life.
Fair enough.
Eve, great perspective. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. 26 minutes past 9. We'll be back 6 a.m. bright and early, ready to go again, fully pepped up. Up next?
Up next, it's Bev and Andrew with To The Point.
Have a good day.
Very good morning to you. Yep, this is To The Point with me, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We've got a busy show today, haven't we?
Very busy show. Digesting that huge report into the Metropolitan Police. Frankly, not fit for purpose.
No, absolutely. And yesterday I did an interview with one of the victims of Eleanor Williams' lies. She's the girl that accused those gentlemen of being in an Asian grooming gang. She was the one who assaulted herself, hospitalised herself. In fact, you don't want to miss that. It's a fascinating insight into what happened to him.
And is Trump going to be arrested today? We'll follow all of that. That will be with you shortly.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday